What's up, Johan? Thanks for being here, man. This is the first time I'm doing a podcast, and I'm actually pretty excited to have you. So I don't know how to formally begin all of this, so I won't do any of that bullshit. But just keep it as real as possible. Um, Thanks for being here, man. Just to give a brief introduction, my last video, I don't know if I shared that with you, but I was talking to Meron and I was talking to Mugda about this whole David Icke thing. And they're like, Johan's the person you should be talking to about this. And they shared their number with me. We had this beautiful conversation. You were amazing enough to actually come on board and do this whole thing with us. So, just for everyone who's watching who might not be familiar with your work, could you help us understand what your journey's been like in this space and just a little brief introduction for yourself?
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Path. First of all, it's very rare that people actually, have the courage to start looking into this stuff because of the kind of backlash it involves. So I'm glad you're at least giving your audience a chance to hear opinions that are considered very controversial today. So I'm very thankful to you for that. And at the same time, I think it's going to help my audience as well because you're coming from a perspective where you aren't steeped in conspiracy material, and you don't really fully understand the stuff that people who've been looking into this understand. So it's going to be great from a beginner's perspective as well because you'll kind of ask the questions that they would have. So I hope you sort of do a good job at that. I'm sure you will. And if I can just summarize my story, because I've said this many times on my channel and in my interviews as well, but basically what happened to me is at one point in my life, we've all been brought up in a bubble. Okay, if you've heard Ike talk, he talks about the program. It's basically like a set of downloaded perceptions that are fed to you by the institutions in society that are operated and run by a very dark and twisted group of occultists, which basically have hijacked the planet and want to drive all of us towards a very dark and sinister end. And that bubble is basically what most of us are born and brought up into because it's the parents who pass on the programming that they've had through their childhood and their growing up onto us without any malice of their own. We go through the education system where it's like the state is basically telling us what they want us to believe. If you listen to people like Stalin and Hitler and stuff, they understood the importance of getting the child early and basically, putting into their minds what they want to put in there so that they basically control the person for the rest of their life, because it's in the very early years of your life that people are the most suggestible and the worldviews are formed. And as you pass out from that education system, you basically start to hit the mainstream institutions where everyone's basically confirming their programming to everyone else. So it's like a very tiny confirmed range of ideas that people are constantly interacting with, which they have the audacity to call normal. And then what happened to me is like an incident basically happened in my life which caused a lot of trauma, and something came and pricked that bubble. And this is what a lot of people call awakening, when
Mm.
you've seen life in such a narrow perspective, I would say, compared to the vastness of the information and insight that's available. Once you break out of the tiny bubble, it basically totally shakes you up, and you take a lot of time to recalibrate because you just don't know what's right and wrong. Once you open your mind and start to find out that there are so many things, so many fields of research, areas of investigation that you've been fed mistruths and outright lies on by mainstream
It's been
society.
hidden from you, rather, right? You start digging deeper, and then you're like,
Yeah, so
it gets worse because you don't know that it's been hidden, and then when you realize that it's hidden, it's just like, why?
so most people have that barrier. Firstly, the barrier into getting into this kind of information is the claims you're making sound so outlandish and far out to someone who's
This guy
been
is going
raised in the
crazy.
system. Because I tell you that the truth of what's happening, it's it's like a it's like another dimension away from the kind of normalcy that we are fed in mainstream society. So it's that leap, that extraordinary difference between what we are told is going on and what's actually going on, that makes
Hmm.
people think like it's just impossible. This couldn't be going on. So that's the biggest kind of thing that keeps people from going there. And then another thing is basically like, they would never do that kind of, like it's like, people aren't so bad that they would do the kind of things you're saying, or have such a kind of agenda for society wherein it would harm them as well. So there
It's
are
like your
many.
belief build your identity, and because if something is breaking your beliefs by such a vast degree, then it kind of causes an identity crisis. So it's difficult to believe that as well. So I think one of the purpose of actually having this conversation is helping people create and giving them a reason to keep an open mind towards this, so that they can not have that crisis when something like that actually ends up happening, or if or not, that's like completely subjective, but just like, why is it important?
And there are a lot of psychological factors as well that keep people from going there. There's a lot of peer pressure when
Yeah.
individuals start to. I've seen this to so many of my friends and even to myself as well. It's like when you start to step outside of that tiny bubble that everyone's been programmed in,
Yeah.
everyone basically trying to like pull you back. There's like pressure from everywhere, your family, your like people down the street, the people you've been brought up with, because everyone's living their so-called normal lives, and you basically sort of tune out and you know tune into something totally different. So you kind of get perceived as mad by everyone else, but you're not going mad. You're just expanding
You're
your
getting to who you are
consciousness.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just expanding your
Like when.
consciousness to
Hmm.
tap into different levels of information that those people don't have access to because they haven't had that perceptual bubble break yet, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
People who are going through
it's
a paradigm shift, people that in their environment would usually pull them back because it's difficult for them to actually even see that happen at the psychological level.
My point is there are
Um,
there are things in the mind that stop people from questioning their own beliefs. There's a psychological phenomena called cognitive dissonance. When if you have
yeah.
a sort of firmly held belief and something comes up to challenge that, it triggers a very deep emotional sort of response, a knee-jerk response in you. And
Hmm.
the most obvious kind of response to that is someone has a very very fixed belief system, like say a hardly staunch religious person, and you come and tell
Hmm.
them something which you know would obviously imply that what they believe can't be true. And instead of
Yeah.
actually questioning and thinking that, okay, I've come across this new set of information which is challenging my belief, how do I make both reconcile? I should look into that and then sort of adjust my beliefs accordingly after I've looked at both things. But instead there's just this knee-jerk react, like sort of dismissal of the new
Defensiveness.
information. Yeah, because like if what I believe is right, that automatically can't be true. And
Yeah.
this is the mindset that people need to break. It's not about uh, you know what we
It's
believe
about
so
being able
much.
to
It's about
identify that, okay,
having.
which is,
What
yeah.
I mean is, it's not about
Okay.
what we believe. It's about, as long as we have a rigid belief, which can't be moved by new information, we're going to be
That's
mentally
right.
enslaved. So people
Yeah.
need to have that
100%.
flexibility, wherever they're coming from, whether you're a like big believer in religion, whether you're a hardcore skeptic atheist, wherever you fall in that false dialectic, I would say, because they're opposites, they're not opposites really. But wherever you're
Hmm.
coming from, people need to have the open-mindedness to actually consider new information and be able to reintegrate it into your worldview and then decide where you want to go instead of just dismissing it because if I believe what's right, that can't be true by default.
100%. Yeah, just when, it used to happen to me as well, where as a child, if someone would try and break my beliefs, I used to be super like strong headed, and I realized how many opportunities I've missed because of that, and how many things I realized today that just because of being open minded I've been able to make sense of. But earlier I'd just be like, no, this is the only way that it's done, and that has caused me to miss out so much. And then later on in life, when I just like opened my mind up, listened to people, questioned it, tried it and tested it out for myself, I was able to make more meaning out of it. Some things I believe, some things I didn't, but I think that's what we're trying to get at, as giving people a reason. So, what's the kind of work that you've been doing since the past 4 years? If you can dig a little bit into that, and then I've like shitloads of questions to ask you.
Yeah, sure. I look forward to that. So
Yeah.
basically, I started my journey of so-called waking up, as most people call it right now, with a lot of it's a so-called like spiritual material or mystical information, kind of like Deepak Chopra's and Sadhguru kind of people. past life regression material with Brian West and near-death experiences, the whole so-called woo-woo side of things. That's where I basically started my investigations, and that was led by, like I said, a, a hard phase in my life that basically led me to ask these questions about who I am. Where do we find ourselves, and what is the purpose of life? I didn't really start asking myself the question who is really running the world back then, because I wasn't concerned with it, but I was more concerned with deeper existential questions. Like, what is the meaning
Mm.
of life? Why did we even come here? Are we just biological
Mm.
robots that are supposed to disappear into nothingness, like people like Dawkins and others would have us believe, or is there some deeper fundamental meaning to it? That's what drove me into exploring the more spiritual kind of material. Like I was saying, when you start to look for the truth, when you have this deeper meaning to understand what the truth about the world and the self is, you basically land up running into a wide array of subjects, because like I was telling you on the call earlier path as well, that this conspiracy that's being taken place right now on this planet, and I would say it extends beyond this planet into the interdimensional spiritual world as well, doesn't just end here. It basically cuts
Mm.
and runs into every area of life. So if you, and this is something I realize now, so I'm just giving you perspective as to back then. This is the reason why I
Mm.
landed up coming into these areas, because
Mm.
there is manipulation and cover up going on in almost everywhere you look. I mean, I find it surprising, dude. Like, you see this one bookshelf behind me. It's basically just
Yeah.
a smear of the library I have at home, because it's just so many fields of research that you have to start investigating and looking into, whether it's economics, whether it's health, finance, spirituality, uh, the afterlife, extraterrestrial life. That's just, I mean, like, it's vast
Why
and
didn't?
overwhelming. This is another reason why people are hesitant to go into this, because it takes an understanding of many different subject areas in order to put the pieces together
Connect the
and
dots.
actually realize the bigger picture. So my quest for truth into understanding the meaning of life and the nature of self and what happens when we die and things like that led me into, like, really understanding what's going on the planet as well. Because
Mm.
this is a misconception in the spiritual community that your spirit is kind of superior to matter, and materialism is basically Maya, it's illusion, and it doesn't matter, and all that matters is the spirit. It doesn't work like that. This plane of existence is as spiritual as what happens when you die. It's just a different level of manifestation as to
Yeah.
where we are
Yeah. I
experiencing
was
it.
reading in the autobiography for Yogi. I don't know if you read that.
Ma'am,
The
I know,
three
ma'am.
worlds.
I'm familiar with New Age
Yeah.
material. Like I said, I've explored a lot of mystics like Sadhguru and other people. So I'm familiar with the worldview and where they come from, and I largely disagree with it to a significant extent. I would
Yeah.
say that, but I mean that's a conversation we should have for another time
Yeah.
once we've
That's
covered
another
the
topic
basics,
in
because
itself.
that's when you're starting to
Yeah.
go into the more deeper
Strictly relevant stuff.
esoteric
Yeah.
areas. But
Yeah. Yeah.
my point is, once I started looking into the spiritual
That's
stuff,
more unbelievable than these conspiracies, I would say.
it led me to looking into false flag attacks, like how governments are staging terror attacks in order to stimulate fear in the people, in order to push certain agendas that they want to push. COVID-19 being one of them. They're called false flag operations, where basically there are hidden elements in society, like this cabal or this pyramid structure, whatever name you want to call it. That I'm referring to. Many people call it the Illuminati and stuff. I wouldn't call them
Mm.
Illuminati. Actually, they're not illuminated at all. But you know, whatever people call this dark force that's actually running the world, uh, they basically covertly manipulate events and look to generate a fear response in the people, because fear is the currency
Mm.
of control. And if you can basically terrorize the population to fear death, it kicks on something called the reptilian brain. The amygdala in your brain is basically
Fight or
like
flight.
your fight or flight response, which
Yeah.
draws the blood away from your neocortex, your critical thinking part of the brain, and puts it towards the extremities, which really
Mm.
stops you from thinking straight and makes you highly suggestible.
Mm.
And then that's when they've generated that response in society. The fear of death basically, makes most people submit to anything. As long as people want to survive, it's like they'll agree to basically anything in order to do that.
It's like
unless
when I
they're
create the environments around you in a certain way, I'm forcing you to think a certain way. And, I've put you in these walls, and now there's the only one way out that I'm showing you. So you decide, do you want to survive or do you want to stay inside?
exactly they create the problem, and then they give you the solution that they already had planned before they even created the problem. The problem was just an excuse to implement the things they want to implement. It kind of justifies the action and makes it legitimate in the minds of the public because they don't
Okay.
understand how the structure works. So
Before we actually get deeper into this,
no, I don't want to go
okay,
into
finish
COVID.
the
I was
thought.
just touching on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
concept of a false flag activity as to
Awesome.
how
Yeah, yeah, go
the
for it.
deep state or the cabal basically engineers events and then uses it to manipulate us in ways that they want to. I started looking into that kind of material. I started looking into how the banking system is manipulated, which I think is one of the biggest scams on the planet. The very act of creating money out of thin air and charging interest on it is, I think, a crime. And most of these bankers would probably rot in hell from where I look at it. And you know, I'm just gonna touch on these subjects. We don't have the time period to actually dive deep into
Yeah,
them. If people want to explore these uh, points that I'm putting out, there are loads of videos on my channel, and I'm gonna be doing many more. So you can go and take a deeper dive into that. And there's a lot of material on my website as well for people who want to
yeah,
take a deeper look at it. So I
yeah.
started coming across all these areas of manipulation on our planet as to how we are being manipulated by this pyramid, this basically the satanic hierarchy of dark occultists that have, like I was talking about information control earlier, they've basically hijacked all the source of information and kept them hidden from all of us. They've sort of amassed all this information and kept it away from public scrutiny. They've hijacked and taken control of the institutions that feed us our perceptions, like the mainstream media
Mm,
and the education system. These are the primary places where we get most of our perceptions from. So, I mean, obviously, if you want to go and analyze how they've hijacked these institutions, it's an entire field of study, which there's a lot of
yeah.
evidence for. But my point is they've basically done that, and the control of perception is the most important thing because path you need to understand. If I want to influence your actions, I first have to influence the way you see the world because it's your perception that's going to dictate how you're going to behave. For instance, if you believe everything the government is telling you about COVID-19 and you buy into their version of the narrative, you will basically
Mm.
feel justified that yeah, I should stay at home and save lives. And
It's
the
like a
go
very psychological phenomena as well, right?
yeah,
Like, because you have a certain self-image of yourself. If you like take it to a micro level and you believe that Parth is this kind of a person, then Parth will behave like that person. Similarly, at a macro level, if the government is making us believe and we buy into that, then we have to act in like in alignment with our beliefs because otherwise it just doesn't work.
they basically control our actions by controlling how we think. That's why they have so fiercely tried to control and censor this information from getting out. I was like, this is why they basically like went bang after David Icke's interview like half an hour after it aired,
Yeah.
and it was basically like reaching millions already in that half an hour. So they understand the impact this information is having, especially right now when people are sitting at home and they're kind of starting to open up to another explanation of things. Because even the most, I would say, the most mind controlled and close minded people, they're starting to have some semblance of something feels wrong. Like maybe it's not all manipulated, but there's something else going on here that we're not being told about, and people want
On that
to.
note, actually, I just want to add, like, one of the reasons for doing this whole conversation, and that triggered me to do this whole conversation with you was what actually happened with David Icke. I saw the whole thing. I didn't see David Icke 2, which was banned, but I saw Pink Icke, sorry, David Icke, Pink Icke 3, and it just like fascinated me, made me question so many things. I didn't believe it 100%. I believed a lot of elements of it, but I was curious to kind of know more. I ended up seeing Plandemic, and what I realized is all of these conversations, all of the people, and whatever David Icke is saying, like the fact they ban them is what actually like really pissed me off because I feel like every person has a right to make their own decision, right? If you are completely removing one side of the conversation in and of itself, then you're like you very correctly said, like you're building these walls for a person, you're creating a problem, and if someone is trying to remove those walls for you, you're basically like killing that person. Like, and internet is the day of communicate, like is the way of communication, and that's like the only way people actually get out. And you control that to a certain degree. Like if what David Icke said, like how Silicon Valley is owned, everything's off. So that is actually one of the reasons where I'm like more people need to be just like aware of this and need to talk about it. If they're not like micro amount of people doing this, then I doubt that any type of change is going to be made, because it's easy to take down one person, but when it hits the masses, then you have something to like really cover up, and it gets more and more visible because of that. So before we actually get into the why as to why would they do this, right? Um, which I'm sure like there are a lot of reasons which add up, because I can see the shelf behind you and I'm sure you've done your research. So I want to know, for every person listening right now, what are the consequences of not listening to this? What is the importance of giving attention to this kind of information, and what are the consequences of not listening to it? And then we can get into the why these people are doing it, because once you understand the consequences, let's hit the reptilian brain for our users right now, just by giving them the importance of this information, and then let them decide if they want to hear further.
What we are looking at right now, it's basically a fork in the road. Okay, as a human species, I'm telling you, which where we go from here in terms of the direction the people of the world take is going to dictate whether we move into a world where we can actually manifest freedom and be able to live prosperous lives and ensure that our kids and grandkids live prosperous lives as well, or
Hmm.
we are going to move into a world which the forces that run the planet have planned for a very, very, very long time. And in order to give people an idea of what's coming, if people have read 1984 by George Orwell, even he vastly, vastly underestimated what was coming. What we are staring at, what we are looking in the face of right now, coming very, very soon, is a very dark and sinister agenda, and it's ultimately a battle for the human soul. What they want to create is a totalitarian fascist world government wherein there's one point on the planet which is basically one point of power on the planet which is basically dictating rules and law to the entirety of the globe. They want to end national sovereignty everywhere. They basically want to destroy individual rights in the name of the so-called collective, which is something you see coming up again and again with things like climate change, and which with even things like COVID. It's like, your rights don't matter now because we are living in an emergency and it's all about the greater good. And if you want to really understand the what is staring us in the face, I would highly recommend the viewers to go and check out my Agenda 21 presentation, where I basically lay out in great detail the things that are planned for us. But if I can give you some basic clues about the kind of society we're heading into, it's a world with 24/7 surveillance, our minds connected to artificial intelligence with the capacity for free thought compromised and in jeopardy as well, possibly going towards a point ultimately evolving in the future where we don't even have control of our minds anymore. I mean, Silicon Valley tech giants are already talking about Neuralink and brain computer interfaces where potentially Facebook can read our thoughts and we can, sort of maneuver our way around the digital realm and upload our minds to the cloud and things like that. They are fundamentally after taking control of our consciousness, because like I was telling you earlier, this whole game is all about the control of information. If people are fed the wrong information, if they put garbage in their minds, garbage will come out through action. And this is why the ultimate goal is to go for the human mind, the human ability to actually have individuality and sovereignty, and be a creative soul which can form its own opinions. They're ultimately after that. That is ultimately what is under great deal of jeopardy. As we're seeing right now, are there will be severe restrictions on movement. You will not be allowed to go anywhere they don't want you to go. They basically want to pack all of us into really tiny micro apartments where we are living in, like, these kitchen size flats basically, where your bed comes out of your sofa, and it's like a really adaptable kind of flat where most people are crammed and they're living in that. There's no kind of privacy, as I said, because everything is just known to the authorities constantly. Just look at the level of surveillance we've got to already and what's being justified as a result of COVID. This is nothing,
Okay.
and if we go on continue down this road, the level of surveillance is just going to get worse and worse ultimately.
While listening to you, I'm sorry to cut you out. While listening to you, I'm just trying to understand that. See, a couple of bits I agree with, because you know how who's that guy uh, who came out for the NSA? Uh,
William Binney,
no, no, no.
Edward Snowden.
Edward Snowden, for example. There's so many like cases like this where people are coming out talking about surveillance being one of the things, right? And I also, because I've done research, understand the kind of surveillance that's being imposed, for example, on Korea, right? With the kind of tech and stuff they use. And similarly, people in America aren't able to do that because they don't fucking trust the government, right? Now, the problem that's going to be created in a normal mind while listening to this information is that are you crazy, right? So that's legitimate, because even I believe that to a certain extent, that I would think the same way. I'm just taking some time to articulate my thought. B is like, why should I believe you? And what are the consequences of not believing you, right? So you told me the consequences of not believing me, but how can I prove that to myself is the question that comes to my head after that. How can I prove that it is going in this way? Because, you know, it's like, if I tell you something, you might believe it. But if I show you a way to see it for yourself, you're definitely going to believe it. So if you can just expand upon the things that a normal person can observe, or maybe things that they can watch, and we'll get into more detail of this, but you understand the importance of this question, like how can a person prove this to themselves? Because until they do start seeing from a lens like this, they're not going to be able to process the information that is being shared with them.
Firstly,
Even from
I'll say the easiest way to prove this to yourself, uh, pick up an Ike book from the 1990s. Okay, a book like "And the Truth Shall Set You Free," and see what he's the detailed predictions he's made in the 1990s. Okay, this is 30 years ago, man. 30 years ago, all
yeah,
right. Is it? And
yeah.
people just need to ask themselves the question: if a guy, an ordinary guy in Britain, sitting in his one-bedroom flat, is basically able to describe in great detail what is playing out on the television news right now, uh, 30 years ago, how did he know that? How did he know the society that we're living in today in fine detail described back 30 years ago? I think that
Give
should
me
be the
some
biggest.
examples.
He was talking back then about mandatory microchipping. We're already seeing right now the push towards, I mean, just like 3 days back, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was kind of capitalizing on COVID and saying that there's a need to microchip children now. There are workers in Sweden who are already being microchipped, and
It's ridiculous.
and Ike was talking in the 1990s about a CIA whistleblower he met, who was talking back then about microchips being inserted in vaccination programs. And even back then, the microchips are basically smaller than a grain of rice, which could be inserted in, uh, you know, the vaccines that are being administered to people. So,
Hmm.
like I'm saying, people just have to look at the world right now and ask themselves this honest question: do we live in a world where we are free? I mean, the biggest problem is most people don't even know what freedom is. Freedom is the ability to engage in actions that don't uh, initiate violence against someone else. That's basically what freedom is in a sentence. And it's a pity that most of the planet can't even define what freedom is. And just ask yourself the question: what can you do today without asking the government's permission? I mean, people used to laugh at me 5 years ago when I said few people run the world. When you analyze what's going on today, few people in the world have basically put half the world under house arrest. If you cut
Yeah,
all the bloody propaganda aside, and the reasons we're being convinced to stay at home, is basically few people in the world that have orchestrated this whole thing and convinced half the planet to basically stay locked inside their houses. So
yeah.
it's all about understanding the plan that these people have, and this plan has been described in great detail. Like I said, again, I'm just touching on aspects and elements of this agenda that are planned for us. There are many and
Hmm.
various things that are coming down the pipeline in great detail. A big one of them for parents being the seizing away of children from them, and all children being raised by the state, which is something Aldous Huxley wrote in Brave New World as well in 1932. Okay,
Yeah.
Huxley and Orwell basically wrote like really prophetic books. back then. How did they know it? They were connected. Both of them were connected to a society, a secret society called the Fabian Society, which
mm,
which basically connects into this cult eventually, and they would have had access to some of the things that were planned coming on now back then. So they were able to accurately predict the future while they sat and called it prophetic. There's nothing prophetic about it. If you know, look, if you know, if there's an agenda for the world and you basically get access to it, you basically become a prophet if you can access their agenda and expose it, and nothing is done from the people's side to intervene to stop it. This is why if people read Ike's books from 30 years ago, they're so bloody prophetic. I mean, I even read them now and my fucking jaw drops looking at some of the things he said then, and it's literally playing out on the television news now. This is what has driven so many people towards going into his books as well, because he was literally describing in fine detail what is happening right now back then. So people should just ask themselves the question, if someone has warned us about these things happening so many years ago, shouldn't we at least have the intelligence to actually investigate it and see if it stands up or not?
just give it a chance at
Yeah,
least.
exactly.
Like, let your conscience or your gut decide whatever you want to. But you know what actually moved me towards this, and we spoke about this previously also, was the last 40 minutes of that conversation where it talks about love and spirituality and how we're just an illusion. And like, I believe in all of these things, which is a very deep thing to talk about right now. But just the fact that he understands how like this world is created, or like the spirituality of it, and the elements that the dual nature of everything, and just all that kind of stuff that he spoke about, love and fear, and like just spirituality in general, made me realize, okay, this guy's not crazy. Because a couple of times during the interview I was like, okay, I can understand why people think of him as a little bit wacko, but I'm pretty sure like after that last 40 minutes I knew that this guy is not crazy per se. He knows what he's talking about, and he has 100% belief in it. And he wouldn't have just come out and said this, because he understands the consequences of something like this. And yeah, people will obviously call you crazy, but um, don't want to be like poetic, but like the crazy ones have actually been the small majority of people who have been able to, you know, do the mass things. So just the fact that he's coming out and doing all of this is something very brave on his side as well. And he's been doing this for 30 years now. What are like, do you think like are like two, three specific conspiracies that would affect the general person today, and a person should generally like think about?
Okay, so I'll sort of stress this point again. When uh, when I talk about manipulations in certain areas, like say
Yeah.
electromagnetic radiation being harmful for the body, or
5G?
vaccinations, we come to that.
Yeah.
Vaccinations being not what they're told to be, and
Yeah.
many and various areas, the banking system and being manipulated, and
Yeah.
secret societies, UFOs, all this stuff. It's like people think automatically like there's just so many conspiracies. How can all of them be true? It's
Mm,
not that there are many and various conspiracies. There is
mm,
basically one conspiracy. Okay, it's a it's a network of bloodlines that go back into the ancient world, that have incessantly interbred with themselves to preserve their genetic lineages. They have an agenda to take over the planet. They have an agenda to take over every single person and all the resources of the planet since a very very long time. They've worked through the ages to constantly incrementally centralize power to a point now where they are reaching the stage where if if they get ahead with their plans as they will be able to pull off in establishing a world government, which is what the ultimate goal is, like I was saying. So this idea that there are different conspiracies is not true. There is one conspiracy to take control over humanity, and that is manifesting in different areas of life, because if someone wants to take control of humanity, they have to take control of every aspect of humanity. So they would have to take
mm.
control of the finance. They would have to destroy people's health
Yeah.
in order to control them that way. They would have to manipulate the economic system. They would have to manipulate the food supply. They would have to do all these things if their ultimate goal is to take control of humanity. So I think that the what we can talk about is which elements of this conspiracy affect people the most urgently right now, I would say.
Yeah, that's
And
that's that's pretty much it,
yeah,
yeah.
I just want to put that into context. And I would say that I think the most important thing that people need to focus on right now is understanding natural law. Okay, this is the most occulted, hidden. Occulted just it doesn't mean satanic or something like most religious people automatically get that knee-jerk reaction when they hear the word occult. It just means hidden information. Okay, that's all it means. So we've been kind of manipulated all our life to think that okay, occult is something you shouldn't go into. It's a dark occult, and it's what these bloody satanists and all deal with. But it just means hidden
Mm,
information. So
mm,
the understanding of natural law, which is basically universal law, God's law, cause and effect, karma, whatever people want to call it. People call it different
yeah.
names, but it just means that there is an objective difference between right and wrong behavior. That's all it means.
Mm,
Okay, and understanding the difference between right and wrong action is what gives people enlightenment. And sounds kind of straightforward. You mean like Johan? Most people know what right and wrong is. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong
mm.
to murder someone. It's wrong to trespass. It's wrong to coerce someone.
Bring harm about anyone
Yeah,
else,
yeah. It's
basically.
just wrong to
Yeah.
initiate violence against someone else. Most
Yeah.
people understand that, right? You would think so, but there has been a big blind spot left for government in this whole equation because
At the
we
same time, it's been so coveted. So even if you're harming someone else, you don't know that you are by indulging in some actions.
So I would say most people in life understand that interpersonally it's wrong to do these things. Okay, for me it's wrong to come and hit you or sort of take your money or coerce you in some way. But the point I'm trying to make is when it comes to the institution of the state, the government, the people in government somehow get a moral exemption from all this. So if a bunch of people get into power, they can it's okay if they rob from us in the name of taxation. It's okay if they basically monopolize the legal system and
Yeah.
pass victimless crime laws. Okay, like banning drugs and basically like making things illegal wherein harm is not involved. Okay, that's
Mm,
what I mean. So when people understand the true difference between right and wrong, you can evaluate these things and actually figure out, is the government the wrong party, or is the person initiating the crime the wrong party? Or the best example for millennials is wheat consumption. Okay, smoking a plant is wrong and that's the government today, although there's a lot of a
yeah.
movement going on from the people's side to basically legalize it. But that being aside, it's still wrong. If you were to do it today and an agent of the state came and caught you, they would be justified in their own mind in using physical violence against you
But this is
as per the
exactly
law.
the kind of wall that we were talking about. I don't smoke pot, but just like the walls that we spoke about, it's a bloody plant, first of all. Right? Even if you're smoking opium, technically, who the fuck is there to decide like if it's wrong or right for me? But please continue.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. The difference between right and wrong is clear cut. Okay. This is
Red is
the
wrong, blue is fine. Like, yeah,
it's the second
Mando.
it's basically the second tenet of the satanic religion. This belief that
Mm,
right and wrong are relative and man can just decide what right and wrong is.
mm.
This is a satanic belief literally, and it leads to tyranny and
It's
government.
flexible. It's
Sorry.
flexible. It's flexible. That's why it's wrong, I believe.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas right and wrong are actually objective and set in stone. It's wrong for
Yeah.
people to initiate violence in the form of rape, theft, murder, trespass, coercion. That's it. And every other
Any sort of
behavior
wrong.
other than that is right. So
Yeah.
I think this is the most important thing people need to understand, because if they actually understand what freedom means, what their rights are, their right,
Mm,
people have the right to do everything they want as long as they're not initiating violence against someone else. You can go smoke
mm,
pot. You don't have an obligation to have your money stolen to you by the state and they can call it taxation. Once you
mm,
understand the difference between right and wrong, the government has done so many things today that are actual wrongdoings in the eyes of natural
mm,
law, in the eyes of God's law. But because people believe that right and wrong are subjective, and we can create these governments that can basically make one thing right in one place. Like for example, it might be right in some country to smoke this plant, but if you move into another geographical jurisdiction, it suddenly becomes wrong to do that, and then in another place you can be taken to jail for doing that. So it's this kind of arbitrary thing that basically leads to human tyranny and the destruction of human freedom, because people don't understand the simple difference between right and wrong behavior. And it is
Which roots
understanding
from
that.
freedom.
Sorry.
Which roots from freedom actually, because you don't
Yeah,
understand freedom.
that's what I'm saying. Most people can't even define what freedom is. Like I said, freedom is just basically the ability to engage in behavior that doesn't initiate violence against someone else. This is the most
Mm.
important information to understand, because understanding natural law and understanding right and wrong for yourself can help you determine your own life and help you live in accordance with that law, instead of most people condoning government actions just because some bunch of politicians came into parliament and scribble something in a book. That doesn't change right and wrong. They're set in stone by God. Okay. And like I said, so this basic conspiracy, which is threatening us in a very, very impactful way right now, is the implementation of the 5G rollout and the imposition of mandatory vaccines, along with having us all locked up in our houses while they are basically advancing uh, the furtherment of this agenda in many ways. If we get a time to talk about it, I'll describe it. But
Mm.
I think 5G mandatory vaccinations on everyone and the implementation of the 5G rollout are things that people really, really need to focus on in the immediate outcome, because
Mm.
they are going to, this phase one of this lockdown is eventually going to be eased out a little bit, and people are going to be allowed to do certain things. But we no doubt are going to have a phase two, wherein they're basically going to blame it on all these freedom loving people who are like, okay, let's get out and have a good time, and we don't need to stay inside and stuff. That phase two is going to be blamed on all the people who sort of are demanding their rights and talking about freedom today. And it's at that point where the restrictions will be much, much more severe, and they'll basically
But
suggest
that's
that.
like a trap, no, Johan, because by the end of it, okay, let's just take two scenarios. Let's say it's not for real for sure, and people are going to obviously fight for their freedom and go out on the streets, and like how it was happening in New York as well, right? Second is, let's assume a bit of it is real, and people actually do go out, and it does end up causing it, and it's like either or way, it's like a trap, right?
So
If you go out,
we'll have to go into the actual COVID situation for that as well. But
I have
for,
a lot of questions about
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah, no, no, sure thing. That's a very lengthy conversation. So let's go into that properly. But
yeah,
what I'm saying is that I'm just telling you what they're planning for us, basically, so the people become aware about it. Just laying out
yeah.
what they've planned according to what I've
I
researched.
told you.
And and they're going to scare us into shit us and like basically make us shit in our pants in order to make us accept that vaccine once the second phase is in, and roll out immunity passports, and basically like a big surveillance dragnet is something that they're working on building right now, wherein you'll need the permission of the authorities to travel. You'll basically have quantum
Yeah.
tattoos inserted inside your skin to show that
Yeah,
you
no
know.
one without that vaccine, they'll be recognized like if someone has taken the vaccine or
Yeah,
does
yeah. This is
something,
what Bill Gates is
boycotted
working on
basically.
with MIT and other institutions in order to create this quantum dot tattoo technology, wherein if the vaccine is inserted inside you, you don't even have a
You
paper
have it.
anymore. It's basically like imprinted in your skin, and
Yep,
someone can
Ned.
scan that and figure out if you've taken it or not. So you can't even fake it. Okay, this is the
He's
point
in the
to where,
system.
yeah, this is the point to where they wanted to get, and
Okay, now I have one question before we talk about that, like which I was watching in. I don't know if you know Patrick Bet David, Value Nation or something like that. He speaks to Robert Kennedy Jr., this guy's nephew. He talks a lot about big pharma and like vaccines, and he's fighting that whole scheme, right? I remember watching a little bit of it, and just correct me if I'm wrong, or just guide me in the right direction. He talks about, I think somewhere in the 1990s, some kind of bill or law was passed where the vaccines don't actually need to be like like tested or something like that. Do you know
I'll
what
tell
that
you.
whole thing's about? No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So basically, in 1986, they passed a National Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, which
yeah,
basically waived off all immunity for pharmaceutical companies back then. And
yeah,
it's an absolute travesty, because these people basically got legal immunity for all their products. It's like, imagine you're a businessman, you get to go into an industry where you get to make a product. It's going to go out and it's going to damage people, but the people can't come and sue you personally from that. So this
Yeah.
National Vaccine Injury Compensation Act was basically created in order to create a legal immunity kind of thing for the vaccine manufacturers in America, wherein if a child was injured after vaccines, they could not sue the manufacturer directly. Instead, what happened was that every time people bought a vaccine or a government bought a vaccine, a small part of that, say, price paid to buy the vaccine would go into this fund, okay, as a form of
Mm.
tax. And then people who basically go to the vaccine court and
Oh shit,
ask,
they be paid from that.
yeah, and basically, like, are able to demonstrate that they've been harmed, and the criteria for actually demonstrating that you've been harmed is very, very, very high. And most doctors
Yeah.
are not aware about the fact that this exists. Most people don't even know that there's this
And most people won't even go through by with
vaccine
suing and stuff like
compensation
that.
thing. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's just so humiliating, and the whole system is structured to basically make sure you don't get
Yeah.
it.
He
and
actually
and
even says that they plan it in such a way that even if they end up calculating the amount of money they'll have to pay as legal suits, they still end up making more money. So it's okay.
yeah, so and despite of all that, uh, the courts have landed up paying victims $4.6 billion to date. This is despite everything being put
Yeah.
into place to make sure that as little number of people get in there as possible. So
Mm.
yeah, that's what Kennedy was talking about, and we're going to see that become worse right now with respect to the vaccine situation because
What
in
was the logic behind that time? Like, why were they doing that? How did they show this?
the official explanation is
Yeah.
that the vaccine manufacturers are basically saying, okay, we need this kind of immunity in order to manufacture vaccines, because if people start coming and suing us for vaccines like they were before this thing was passed, they wouldn't be profitable anymore, because they kind of realized how damaging their products were. They should say something to the people as well, because the reason they
That's an
passed
oxymoron then.
yeah, so the reason they passed this law is because they were being sued left, right, and center, and they were having to
Because they
pay
were
out.
fucking up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, like, vaccines again is it's a very
Yeah.
it's a detailed conversation, and I've studied vaccine science very closely. So, following from this National Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, we in America now there's a more messed up version of this called the PrEP Act. Okay,
Mm.
which is basically passed a couple of years ago, wherein if the American government declared a pandemic, it would basically absolve all vaccine manufacturers, all I would say, people who are making drugs to combat the so-called pandemic.
Mm.
It would absolve them of any liability whatsoever under this thing called covered countermeasure. And it's not even to a point where they can go and sue in the vaccine court. They won't even have the ability to do that. They would basically have to prove to the Attorney General in America that the pharmaceutical company had an intent to cause harm to them. They had a like actual they conspired to cause harm to them,
Yeah.
to the Attorney
Which is
General. That,
another layer of
like, yeah, I mean, how are
dealing
you
with the
gonna?
court.
Yeah, it's kind of
You can't fight
impossible to
that
do
kind
that.
of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's they've almost made it impossible to sue any kind of vaccine manufacturer in America. And Bill Gates wants this kind of immunity around the world. He's going around saying this right now himself, that the vaccines.
Everyone should be vaccinated. Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, no,
Same here.
not just that. He's asking for immunity himself because he realizes that this is his way of saying it. But if the
Fuck.
vaccine is causing death in 1 in 10,000 people, and
Yeah.
they can't do these large scale studies right now where they can actually determine what the
Mm.
true sort of
Mm.
impact would be. If you scale
Mm.
it and you require 7 billion people to have it, just do the math. If it's
Mm.
1 in 1,000 people, like how it's like almost 700,000 people in the world that will be
Mm.
killed by his vaccine. And
Yeah.
this is like with conservative estimates. So
Yeah.
that the point with vaccines is, these vaccines have never gone through actual safety testing that a pharmaceutical pill goes through. Okay, when you're consuming
Mm.
something like Crocin or ibuprofen or something like that, it goes through actual phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials where they use a placebo. Okay, they give one group
Mm.
of people the drug they want to test for, and they give another group of
Mm.
people the actual saline placebo, and then they see the outcomes, right? But when it
Mm.
comes to a
Mm.
vaccine, they've never done this vaccine
Yeah.
versus unvaccinated kind of study, where
Mm.
they actually give the group of people, say for
Like a
example,
A/B test.
the COVID vaccine right now, and then they don't
Yeah.
give another group of people this vaccine, and then they follow them and see what happens to them. These studies are
Is
never
this in
done.
relation to postulate that you were speaking about?
No, this is just about the. We'll get into Cox. We'll get into the whole
Yeah,
science behind COVID
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
But I'm just saying, like basic
yeah,
vaccine science, how it's done. Vaccines have
yeah,
never ever been proven to be safe and effective. I'm saying all the way back to polio, smallpox, and most of the other vaccines in the schedule. Not even one of them have randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies behind them. All the studies they have are basically comparing one group of people which are given the vaccine they're testing for, and another group of people which are given another vaccine,
yeah.
which is
And a
like
certain
which is
percentage do
coming.
well. So I mean, yeah, you just prove it.
Yeah, so if
Um,
both
yeah,
groups of people have equal side effects, you basically said that
yeah.
okay, like the product is safe.
This is what Robert Kennedy also actually talks about. He's like things like ADHD, things like I think he talks about what is that? Like so many diseases that are actually created, like peanut butter allergies or peanut allergies, or uh, he talks about so many things that's not hitting my mind right now, but are actually man-made in that way, or even if they're not man-made, they are scaled through these mediums of
No,
vaccines.
we do have some data about vaccine versus unvaccinated children from pediatricians who don't do vaccines and basically compare how their vaccinated clients are performing to the unvaccinated
Mm.
children. And we can we
Mm.
see these differences right there as well. The unvaccinated children have drastically lower rates of, like you were saying, ADHD, autoimmune diseases, and
Yeah,
all other kinds of issues, type 1 diabetes and other kinds of things that
yeah,
the vaccinated children get. So I mean, we just don't know, like till we actually don't have like strong science where they are,
yeah.
really testing out the product. We can't even say like so many things that we've
And
been
the
taking
problem is
for.
none of it is open sourced. So you just have to take their word for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, they said it.
I'm a
Some
big
other guy approved
believer.
it, paid them.
I'm a big believer in
You know?
Bitcoin for the same reason, because it's fully open
Yeah,
source software. And this is the problem
yeah,
with most science today, is it's all hiding under big paywalls where most people can't access the journals and like read the
you,
science for themselves. And we have to trust these middlemen who are basically like bought by
yeah,
the pharmaceutical cartel, and they can just tell
yeah,
us anything. And most of the times, I mean, like I study the scientific literature quite closely. So most of
yeah.
the times what they're saying is like they get a free pass because they can say whatever they want. And it's like, so many of the things they say are
In the
not
name
even
of
backed
science.
up. They're not even backed up by the literature. Like these people, like
Yeah,
Bill Nye and like these other people that masquerade themselves as paragons of science.
yeah.
They're steeped in pseudoscience.
Even what was that documentary that came out on Netflix that just promoted veganism by crazy, like
Game changers.
game changers, yes. And even in that, they talk about how the people, the scientific research community that backed Coke and stuff was also backing this meat research. And they were basically sued inside out by the end of it because they were putting these claims out that, yeah, it does this, yeah, it does that, but none of it was actually true. So it creates this huge form of skepticism within me personally and so many people that who do we believe, who do we not? We'll get into that. Like, that's one of my questions for you later as to how do we even research this information? How do we figure out what's true, what's not? But let's not get into that. Maybe we can like talk about COVID. I remember seeing your video about Kochs postulate. I think there's a 20-minute video explaining as to like if any virus is created, it has to go through this process to be actually recognized as a legitimate virus. And what went on with is that something you want to lean into right now? Do you want to introduce COVID in some other way?
All right.
That's
So
something I'm super curious about actually.
yeah. So just think of it as a common sense way. Koch's postulates is not something sent by God. It's just a common sense criteria that was developed by this guy called Robert Koch, who was a virologist in 1890s in Germany, who basically
Hmm.
like thought, okay, like how would we go about proving that an infectious agent like a bacteria or a virus is actually a cause of disease. And he came up with this criteria that you basically collect a large number of people with a specific set of symptoms. Okay, like say
Hmm.
500 people who don't have
Hmm.
something vague, which can come under many different categories, like say a fever or a cough can come from like 1,000 different
Hmm.
things potentially, which is what COVID
Hmm.
is for the most part. But
Yeah, pneumonia,
yeah,
man. Like
yeah,
it's
exactly. And so you take these large number of people with a specific set of symptoms, you
yeah.
collect material from the tissues or the fluid, and you basically there are certain way that you can do viral isolation by running the running the culture through a filter and then basically putting it through a centrifuge, which separates the viral particles from the rest of the thing, so you can actually analyze what's left over there. And then you can basically see that okay, you have these virus particles over there, and all the people who have these symptoms have the viral particles inside them by the millions, and then you shouldn't
Mm.
expect to find these viral particles in the millions. I mean, like, everyone has some viral material everywhere, because like dormant viruses lying around inside us all the time. Our virome, like,
Mm.
people have heard of the microbiome, but the virome
Yeah.
basically has like 360 trillion viruses inside us,
Mm.
and they've been part of our evolution and have helped us evolve to what we are today. They are a big part of our
Mm.
genetic material as well. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot more to know about viruses for sure. But
Actually, being so immune the whole time in terms of just keeping a mask on or wearing gloves and stuff decreases our immunity, is what I heard a doctor say in this pandemic documentary. Where, and then if we expose ourselves to so many viruses, obviously we're not going to be able to handle it.
yeah, let's get
So
into that once I'm done, like laying this out.
yeah,
So what he said is basically you find these millions of viral particles in the people who are sick. You don't expect to
yeah,
find them in people who are not sick, because of there's so much viral replication going on in someone, and it's not causing
yeah,
any symptoms, and it's not that which is a problem, right? It's just common
yeah,
sense. Then you basically like isolate these viral particles, you inject
yeah,
them into a healthy person, and you expect them to recreate the disease. Okay,
yeah.
and then you isolate the particles again. This is the kind of process
Mm.
that something would have to go through in order to prove that a virus actually causes illness. Now,
Mm.
some scientists like Rivers basically had, they tried to tweak Koch's postulates, and there's even a paper in 1937 that which is written by this guy called Rivers, and he basically says that Koch's postulates have not been proven for any bacteria or viruses, and this was back then. So he basically suggested a reverse criteria, which is like a sort of watered down, more diluted version of it. And
Yeah.
whatever you choose, like there are multiple criteria. There's Koch's postulates, there's Hill's criteria, there's this
Yeah.
reverse criteria. COVID doesn't fulfill any of them. You can watch this brilliant presentation by Andrew Kaufman, who Ike was citing
Mm.
in his interview as well, which he was doing, where he basically shows that it's not fulfilled Koch's postulates, obviously, but it's not even fulfilled the watered down, criteria that was suggested by virologists later on in the scientific community as well. So
Yeah.
I would say that, look, honestly, where I stand with this is a lot of people like Kaufman and some others have come out and said that the virus doesn't exist. Okay, and it's an exosome. I kind of find some problem with that, because what we're really getting to the bottom of studying is that if we really start to get into the cutting edge of science today, a lot of virologists have actually come out and said that you know there seems to be no difference between a virus and an exosome. They behave like almost identically. So think about it this way: what are we told viruses are? They're basically genetic material, RNA or DNA, which are surrounded in a lipid bilayer membrane, which is exactly what exosomes are as well. And
Okay.
viruses are basically portrayed as like, a virus comes into your body, it hijacks your
Yeah.
cellular machinery, and then it uses that to replicate itself and pass on over the body. Exosomes behave in exactly the same way. Your there are
What's an
multi
exosome? Like, I'm sorry, I have no
Yeah, so
background.
exosomes are basically particles that act as signaling molecules. Okay, they basically help
Mhm.
communicate messages between cells. They have
Mm.
receptors, like, there are different exosomes which have different sort of lock and keys, wherein they are attached to different tissues of the body. Like, say, there might be an exosome for your lungs, there might be an exosome to communicate to another part of your body. So they have
Mm.
different, genetic material inside them and different receptor sites.
The characteristics are similar to a virus, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
exactly. So when you start to actually look into the similarities between the both, it's almost the same. So it's like I don't think it makes much sense to say the virus doesn't exist. I would just say that what we are calling a virus is actually something else. It's not something that comes from outside and hijacks us and is the cause of disease. But
Mm.
what a lot of people are starting to, there's some evidence that suggests this. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to be known, because even I'm not sort of made my mind up on this yet. I think there's some genuine evidence to suggest that viruses and bacteria do play some kind of role in disease. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that maybe instead of causing disease, they are
Mm.
playing a more sort of protective role in helping
Mm.
in basically expressing themselves as a symptom of what the underlying disease process is. It's kind of similar to cholesterol. If you follow the whole cholesterol debate, scientists in
Mm.
the 50s and 60s are saying cholesterol causes heart disease. But if we follow
Mm.
the nutrition science that we have today, is basically that cholesterol gets, it's like the it's like the ambulance that basically comes to the
Mm.
site when there's inflammation in your arteries, and it's
Yeah.
trying to repair that site, and then it gets trapped over there because of the inflammation, and it causes a clog. And
It's like
then
you
when
catch the wrong person red-handed.
yeah,
You're trying to save
exactly. And
the
then
person.
sort of surgeons open the tissue, and then they find cholesterol over there. And it's like, oh, cholesterol caused this. And it was actually
Yeah.
over there to repair the damage. So I think
Yeah.
we're seeing something similar with viruses and bacteria as well. It's like, they're a response to
Mm.
illness. They're not something, but I wouldn't deny that at the same time we have to be skeptical of these
Mm.
bioweapon programs wherein that this is not controversial. Absolutely, the U.S. government has spent $100 billion, okay, billion
Mm.
dollars since 9/11 in bioweapons, and
Bug
basically like
weapon.
manufacturing mutated viruses and stuff like that. So although these things can be signaling molecules, if someone was to manipulate it in some way where it can be something that causes problems in some people, I think that's a total possibility as well. So we should
Mm.
be open to that. So I'm just giving you some context as to there's a lot of kind of confusion in this in the people who are trying to look into this as well.
Mm.
That okay, does this virus exist? It doesn't exist. If you actually start to understand this from the scientific perspective and really try to use your own critical thinking to figure out what's going on, it's
Mm.
really irrelevant. Whether you call it a virus or an exosome, the point is that even exosomes are transmittable. Okay, so if I'm manufacturing some exosomes in my body and I cough on
Mm.
you and you'll end up getting the exosomes, if you don't want to call it a
Mm.
virus, call it an exosome or whatever, but it's going to communicate a message to your body as well. And the whole point
Mm.
that the people who believe in exosome theory are saying is that it's not the virus that is causing it, but it's basically giving a signal to your body that something is wrong in the
Mm.
environment, and you need to detoxify in some way. Okay, which
Mm.
is which is what creates the symptoms that we are calling the disease. So
Mm.
this is my main conclusion with this. I think we need much higher level of scientific evidence in order to
Yeah.
actually figure out what's really going on here. From my perspective, I would say though, whether people want to call it a virus or an exosome is not irrelevant. I do think there is some kind of altered genetic material that is going
Mm.
around in the population that is causing
Mm.
some flu-like symptoms, which are different, which are new, which have not been seen before.
Yeah.
I do think that's true from
Yeah.
the research I've done. I don't think it's a total hoax or something, but
Yeah.
the problem lies wherein all these different symptoms. Okay, what we're seeing right now with COVID-19. Okay, people
Yeah.
are saying that people are having blood clots. Okay, they're not being able to like coagulate the blood
Mm.
properly. They're having issues absorbing oxygen. Their ferritin
Mm.
iron levels are like shooting up drastically, and we're having
Mm.
like all these other kind of neurological symptoms and this inflammatory cascade that's going on within the body, and everything,
Mm.
all of this is being attributed to a coronavirus, which
Mm.
mostly like just cause upper respiratory infections.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of big scam that infectious disease people and virologists have played on us, because what they do in all of these outbreaks, whether you follow the swine flu outbreak of 2009, whether you go back to the SARS pandemic, Zika, like all of these things, what they do is they'll exactly like what happened in COVID. They just picked up. If you see the original papers on this, they found 7 people, and they basically isolated
Mm.
the throat swabs from a couple of them, and they found
Yeah.
some you know viral like particles budding out of the cells, and they called it a new disease. This is what these infectious disease people do all the time. They go into these places,
Mm.
they find this new sort of viral material that they find in these patients who have supposedly fallen sick. They ignore all the other factors that could be causing that problem, which are not investigated really. So they're not asking
Mm.
about, okay, what are the other things that are causing disease? Because if you actually understand disease from holistic functional nutrition perspective, which is where I'm coming from, and a lot of like functional medicine, which is like I believe is the cutting edge of medicine today. There is no one cause of disease. Your body is like a bucket. Okay, you have multiple stresses attacking it from all different directions, and when you
Mm.
have like one of the systems fail is when you actually start to manifest your symptoms. So your
Mm.
systems have started going wrong long before you even manifest the symptom for developing something. So yes, a
Mm.
virus could trigger something in you, but
Mm.
it the effect is much more exacerbated if you have issues like say low vitamin D levels, if you have metabolic syndrome, if you have insulin resistance,
Mm.
if you have heavy metal toxicity, if you're living in an area that's extremely polluted, if you have say 5G or 4G extremely concentrated in your environment, like some people live very close to cell towers who are
Mm.
drastically affected more than the people who are living distant from them. So
Mm.
we need to, this whole idea about allopathic pharmacological medicine is that you have this one set of symptoms, and then you basically give it a name and call it one thing. Health doesn't work like that. Okay, there are multiple things that basically work in a synergistic effect to tip your body off in a direction of health or disease, and that is what actually manifests as a symptom.
Mm.
So this these viral particles, the exosomes, what do you want to call them, they might
Mm.
be playing a role in triggering issues in someone. But this is what the data is supporting right now as well, that we've seen cities where we've had drastic levels of extreme pollution like Wuhan.
Mm.
Okay, they were having protests against the incinerator plants going back a year before any of this even started. Like people in China were coming out on the streets and protesting because of the bad air quality. They were one of the first people to deploy 5G in the city.
Mm.
And it's like all over the world we have different sets of people falling sick because of different issues, but everyone
Mm.
is going to the hospital. They're getting tested for this PCR test, which is a big rabbit hole into itself,
PCR.
which we can, the polymerase chain reaction is a test they're using to
Okay.
figure out if you have this genetic material in you or not. Even
So
that is
that's the
high.
exosome.
uh, I mean that's what I said. Like whatever you wanna call it, I think
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
irrelevant. Where what I'm saying is this genetic material is seems to be playing some role in causing
Okay.
upper respiratory infections. That's what
Okay.
I make of it as of now. So
Yeah.
and these people have different
Do
symptoms
you
from
think
all
the
over the
numbers are
world.
accurate in terms of infected people and
No,
the death rate?
okay, let's go to that. So if I can just finish what I'm saying, basically is
Please.
that the data is supporting this right now. If you're a healthy person and you contract the virus, it's not going to be an issue. Okay, the
Mm.
new antibody studies that are coming out right now from places like Stanford, John Unides did this study where he
Mm.
showed that the antibody levels against SARS-CoV-2 are much higher, and most of the population has already been infected. Okay, so
Mm.
it's much more widespread, and this genetic material is spread throughout the population to a large extent than the infected case numbers that we are being told right now. Okay, so
Mm.
that brings down death rate quite a bit. This connects into your question about is the number accurate. So firstly, when you talk about the case fatality rate, is what they are
Mm.
advertising right now. We have to look at the numerator and we have to look at the denominator as well. Okay, so the
Okay.
numerator is basically the people who are dying after contracting the virus. The
Yeah.
denominator is the people who have contracted the virus and
Infected.
are fine. They've recovered,
Mm.
or they've developed
Yeah.
some mild symptoms, or they were totally asymptomatic, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so firstly, the denominator is much larger than we are being told right now, because like I
Mm.
said, the new studies that are being done with the antibodies
So what do
are
you mean is the number of people that are being
have
shown
actually
as
caught
infected people?
have actually caught this virus. I'm saying that's the
Okay.
denominator. The people who have contracted this
Yeah.
virus. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're much
Infected
higher.
people.
Yeah, they're much higher than what we are being told right now, and there are new studies to support this. And the numerator is highly flawed. Okay, because what you need to
Yeah.
understand what you need to show that if say someone dies in a hospital and they want to show that he died of a flu, like he died of complications arising because of a flu that got bad and tipped him off, they have to do an autopsy and actually demonstrate that he died from the
Mm.
flu. But what is happening
Mm.
right now is they're calling it complications because of COVID-19. And they're basically putting COVID-19 on the death certificate for people who are dying of heart attacks, for
And
people who are dying
apparently
of
they're being
cancer.
compensated for that.
Yeah, so there is I mean, like, so much connecting into this that we
Yeah.
can talk about, but
Yeah.
what I mean is that these death numbers are highly being exaggerated. So there are doctors
Mm.
who are being told in America by CDC guidelines that
Yeah.
even if they suspect a patient who have died from
Yeah. I
COVID-19,
saw this today only.
they can put that on the death certificate. And this is
Yeah.
contrary to all other standard operating procedure that has been going on for years.
Yeah.
Okay, because if you actually want to put something on the death certificate, if the cause is unknown, they put unknown over there. Okay, they
Yeah.
don't assume something, but this is totally changed right now. So someone dying of
This
a
is
heart
actually one of
attack.
the reasons why doctors are even coming out,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, because there's a lot of manipulation going on with the way the numbers are being put up,
Yeah.
and with the
Yeah.
way the illness is being treated as well. So doctors are starting to
Yeah.
realize right now that this is more of a blood related condition. Okay, the
Yeah.
oxygen related issues are not with the lungs. They're
Yeah.
basically in the delivery mechanisms through the blood. And
Yeah.
there's studies as well coming out right now just showing that almost 90+% of the people who are put on ventilators die, and they're not doing so many things that they can do before that. Putting people on a ventilator, like
Yeah.
hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There's just so much
Mm.
that can be done, like the different kinds of oxygen interventions that can be done before having to put someone on a ventilator, which aren't being done
Yeah.
right now. And they're
Yeah.
starting to change right now and do this, and they're having better results as well. But a lot of
Mm.
doctors have come out
Apparently,
and said that
chloroquine is also being banned to some extent,
yeah,
like in terms of usage. But
I mean,
Mhm.
chloroquine is an anti-malarial drug, and there are some there's a study which I haven't checked out yet, but I think there's some data suggesting now that they're having good results with actual people, not in test tubes, but with actual people who's being implemented for. My
Yeah.
point is that look, even when it comes to solutions, okay, the doctors who are coming out and saying they're not following the right approach, they're not being given
Mm.
what needs to be given. We need to look at
Mm.
their oxygen intake instead of putting them on a ventilator, because the ventilator is almost causing everyone to die. And the doctors who are
Mm.
people who are working in the hospitals, in the ICUs, who are coming out and saying that people are dying because of iatrogenic deaths, like basically like doctors messing up in how they're managing the ventilator and inflating the lungs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of deaths happening because of medical failures instead of COVID-19, and better approaches that are coming up now, if adopted, would need lead to drastically lower deaths in them.
Mm.
So all these factors need to be put in together and considered when we think of, we see these COVID-19 death numbers spike every day, which is what most people see when they turn on the television, and it drives this fear in them, like, oh my God, I might
Yeah.
be next. I should stay inside. I might be one of these statistics later. But there's just so
And if
much.
you root back to it, it's the fear that's being instilled and causing you to stay home, and then just like conditioning the mind to be able to like live in such a society where it's kind of that kind of rule is how I look at it. I mean, how do you even break out?
It doesn't do any good, right? Putting yourself in so much fear.
Yeah.
We are not.
Yeah.
Look, the reason this lockdown was implemented in the first place, they started out with this
Mm.
narrative that, oh, it's to flatten the curve. Firstly, like, we need to put this lockdown in place because if we don't, we'll face what happened to Italy, and we basically
Yeah.
have this dramatic surge in
They're like
deaths.
60,000 or something, right? How
In
much are they
a,
at?
no, I mean, there's a lot to know
So,
about Italy as well. Like, there's a lot of
yeah.
data that has come out and shown that
Yeah.
the situation over there was highly manipulated as well. But
Yeah.
that
Doctors themselves. Yeah.
yeah, that being kept aside, my point, like, I think you were mentioning the amount that are being paid out. So this
Yeah.
is this is
13,000, 39,000. Some stuff I'd heard.
yeah. So
When
for a
they get it.
doctor in America, if they put a normal pneumonia case, like if they put a patient on
Yeah.
pneumonia, Medicare
Yeah.
basically pays them like $4,500. But if they
Yeah.
diagnose someone as COVID, they get $13,000, and if they put on a ventilator, they basically get $39,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is like a blatant financial incentive as well. So from everywhere you look, it's like from all directions, the medical system is being encouraged to basically like over-report deaths. And we are having the exact
Yeah.
same thing going on here right now. I'm not sure about the Medicare
Is
numbers,
it similar in
but
India, in like other
no, no, no,
countries, is
no,
what
no.
I'm curious.
I've had many people come and tell me horror stories about, like, I'm giving you isolated incidents from friends, people I personally know who I trust, and they've come and tell me that, look, I knew this person. He went into a hospital. He had some other illness, and they basically like coerced this guy to get a test, and then he landed up
Yeah.
testing. Even though he landed up testing negative, they basically like quarantined him, and like they demanded more tests, and then after, in the second or third test he tested positive, and then they basically like quarantined his whole society because one guy tested positive. This is the kind of stuff that's going on the ground. Okay, like they are going out and aggressively testing
Mm.
people,
My
and
yeah.
the testing might be something interesting to go into right now, because all these numbers that are being reported right now are
Yeah.
being done by this test. What is this test claiming to find? The test is not meant to detect a virus. Okay, if you look at the inventor of this test, a guy called
Yeah.
Cary Mullis, he won the Nobel Prize for, and he was a guy expert in chemistry. He
Okay.
basically said the PCR should not be used for diagnostic purposes. It is basically a DNA manufacturing technique where
Hmm.
they take genetic material and then they run it through these cycles to base
Recognize it.
to basically amplify the DNA material. Okay, it's like a way to manufacture new DNA from
Okay.
an
Why is that
existing.
being used in a test?
Sorry.
So why is that being used as a test?
You know what happened? He died 1 year before this started. I'm sure if he was alive right now, it would be a
Yeah.
much bigger problem to actually use this.
Thank you. Um,
Uh,
That's actually my uncle and aunt were actually stuck in the Philippines for the longest time. They'd gone while this whole lockdown happened, and they were stuck over there. They took their passports, everything. They finally came back, and it's such a bad state. Like I wouldn't even comment on how the airports were and how they treated them and all that bullshit. They were given a test for COVID. Obviously, they were negative, but they still put them in a this thing. Like a hotel, which is so dingy at this point. Like it's a five-star hotel, which is so dingy apparently, and they have to like take care of their own shit, like do the whole like just they've been put into this hotel in quarantine with super like dingy circumstances, and they're not even positive, and they're just like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Like the place you wanted to actually even quarantine in, we're not being allowed to do that. So like, what are you trying
no,
to
I've,
do?
I've heard uh, I've heard horror stories from my friends as well. One of my friends is coming back from Gujarat where he was stuck for like 2 months back to his home in Mumbai, and basically after
Yeah,
coming to society, they literally quarantined in society because there's some case over there, and this guy had to go and ask police permission before he could enter his own house, and they
yeah,
literally they could not let him go back in there, so they made him stay in, like, he described it as a brothel, literally, not even joking,
yeah,
like a really really dingy place, like messed up place,
yeah,
and his parents and him were made to stay there, and it's absolutely humiliating, man. Like the kind of
yeah,
stuff people are having to go through right now. We're not even started talking about the collateral damage of the lockdown yet, which is the real conversation people should be having. Like, if
yeah,
people are really concerned about death rate and the number of people who are dying, it should be important to consider, like, is your cure worse than the disease itself? Okay, so
yeah.
firstly, like, I think I've done a decent job in demonstrating why the case fatality rates are much much lower. Even Fauci in
Hmm.
America, okay, who's driving this whole thing, basically in the New England Journal of Medicine, he wrote an editorial to his sort of colleagues, and he was saying this 2 months back that the real case
Hmm.
fatality rate of COVID-19 seems to be like no worse than a like a seasonal
Hmm.
influenza, which is like
Yeah,
0.1%. And
yeah.
the data that's coming out right now supporting that the real
Hmm.
case fatality rate is anywhere between zero point 0.1 and 0.3%. So just look at
Hmm.
this, man. Like, I ask people, zoom out, take a broader look. Look at the infectious disease burden we've had on the world. Okay, look at the tuberculosis deaths. Look at all the
Hmm.
infectious, like, not even the cancer deaths and the bloody diabetes deaths. Those are
The
skyrocketing
false
anyway.
positives that are being like subjected to
No, I'm just
COVID
saying, like,
rather than
people need to have context and realize, okay, this thing is a
yeah,
illness which causes case fatality rate with at of 1.1 to 0.3% at worst, in which is
yeah,
including with all the problems with the medical interventions that are being done right now. If
mm,
we do things like high dose intravenous vitamin C and like infusing certain things like zinc and other minerals in the blood, selenium, which doctors in America have been doing with great success. There have been doctors like
mm,
I think David Brownstein and other people who are working in ICUs, and they're basically like taking people from hospitals who are coming out from there, and
mm,
they have 100% success rate. Okay, people are coming
mm,
from hospitals with diagnosed COVID-19, and they're basically like reversing them and sending them back home with their protocol
mm,
of like intravenous vitamin C and other nutraceutical interventions. So there's so much
mm,
there's so much we can do for this. Okay, like
mm,
the data that's coming out is suggesting that people with vitamin D levels under 30 have a much much statistically higher rate of contracting the illness compared to people with higher levels of vitamin D. There's data
mm,
coming out on insulin resistance, on metabolic syndrome, where people who don't have
mm,
insulin resistance have like much stronger resilience to this compared to the people who do. So there's so much we can do as well to take control of our health in all these
Yeah.
things. Like,
In general, like boosting your immune system is a good strategy, I believe.
yeah, I mean, like, things like vitamin A, D, zinc, selenium, like all these things
Yeah.
are great to like boost the immune system.
Vitamin C is like sold out at every medical store today. If I remember, like a couple of weeks back, I've gone
Yeah,
to a
and I
couple of
mean, like
medical
most
stores so
most of
many
the
times, and
supplement
like,
market is messed up as well because they're basically like making these synthetic molecules and giving it to people instead of having like whole food extracts from
yeah,
like, and the quality supplement market is shut because it's kind of
mm,
not essential to get that. We just have access to these medical stores which give us like really inferior quality supplements. So, I mean, everywhere you look, dude, it's like if these people actually had an interest to protect our health, there's so much
yeah,
we can do today to actually make sure that we are not powerless. That's the whole point.
mm,
Like I was saying, your whether you manifest illness or not, it's a spectrum. You can do so many
mm,
things which can help you be on the other side instead of acting like you're some helpless victim to this virus that's going to come and like you're going to be taken out from it, which is how a
yeah,
lot of people are thinking, and that thinking needs to be changed, which is why like this conversation needs to go forward as to what we can do to sort of make sure
mm,
our odds are in the other direction, that we are resilient
mm,
and we will be fine even if we contract it. I'm telling you, most of us have
mm,
already contracted it because the first case in India started around January, and this has been like
yeah,
going
crazy,
around since then until March, until this whole thing kicked
yeah,
off. So
yeah,
I think we can start talking about the agenda behind this whole thing, and like why the lockdown is being implemented. Especially, like, I think it should be clear by now from what I'm suggesting that for an illness so mild where we can do so much to
mm,
actually like take control of it, there's no need to put the world under house arrest. At best,
yeah,
what can be done is like you basically tell the like really vulnerable people, like the people who have metabolic disease, like
yeah.
heart
Like,
heart
how should I
issues,
them,
like
right?
cancer, like
Yeah,
just basically like probably the government can spend some of its money than like bloody hell spending 20 lakh crores right
the
now,
whole
like
world. Yeah,
yeah, like and they Modi just came and announced a 20 lakh crore stimulus package, which these bloody people who are ignorant in economics think are actually going to
what
help
did he
them.
say?
He came yesterday and announced a 20 lakh crore stimulus package where they're basically going to print up money and give it to industries to save them.
Oh,
So
okay.
instead of doing
But
that,
those are the people that actually need the money, are they?
look, this would sort of take us into a conversation about economics
Yeah,
and what really generates
yeah.
wealth. Because
That's another.
if you really understand economics, printing up a bunch of money and giving it to people
It's
doesn't
just
create any wealth.
reducing the value of the money. Yeah,
You're reducing the value of the money and you're making a small group of people benefit at the expense of others. Okay,
yeah,
that's all
yeah,
that's going
100%.
on. There's no increase in
Yeah,
wealth. The only way
yeah,
wealth is created is through savings and investment. That's the
yeah.
only way. So if they really want to help people, they should stop inflating the money supply like crazy like this, and they should reduce the
Interest
strang
rates and
they
stuff
should
like,
reduce the
yeah,
stranglehold on the economy so that entrepreneurs are
yeah,
free to actually increase the production and help people meet their
yeah,
needs and demands, which is what
yeah,
entrepreneurs actually do. So,
yeah,
like, so I hope it's like sort of clear to your audience that this lockdown is totally unjustified, and at best, what could be done from that side, their side is like basically advise all the people who think they're vulnerable, stay at home. Don't go out. Don't The people who are living in one bedroom flats where they are like
yeah,
cramped up with people, they could probably arrange some accommodation for them where they could move out until the people at who have home at have contracted the illness and have dealt with it, so they develop herd immunity and then the person can go back home so he's safe because the people are not going to transmit the virus to them again because they've already contracted it and dealt with it. So these
yeah,
kind of things could be done instead of basically telling everyone to stay at home. Sweden's approach, basically, like what Sweden has
yeah.
done,
That's what I was wondering.
what countries
Yeah,
like
what was
Belarus have
Sweden's
done.
approach?
Sorry.
What was Sweden's exact approach? Like, I know that they were open pretty much. They didn't have like a proper
Yeah,
lockdown.
so they basically did this, like they advised the elderly and the vulnerable to stay at home,
Yeah,
and they basically let everyone else move around with advice on social distancing and like
yeah,
basic hygiene measures, and
yeah,
they've done well. They've not had these models that people like absolute frauds at the people
yeah,
places like Imperial College, like Neil Ferguson. These models that
yeah,
they bloody put out, they've basically like taken the whole world towards starvation and absolute tyranny. with, like, because these models have been used to justify these lockdowns by saying that, oh, millions of people are
Yeah.
gonna die and this is gonna happen, that's gonna happen. None of these models ever come true. So I think these people need to be held accountable, like especially people like Neil Ferguson. They need to be held accountable for what
Is he
the
the guy from John Hopkins?
no, he's the guy from
Oh,
Imperial College in London who
oh yeah,
basically
yeah,
like
yeah,
made these
yeah.
models. So it's like,
Yeah.
his
Even
mod.
I think Ike was talking about John Hopkins, like them doing a simulation, like I think 6 weeks
So
before.
let's yeah. So that's what I want to get into now. So let's go into the agenda, like the implications of all this. Like, what are the why is the lockdown being really done, and what's the real agenda behind it? So
Yeah.
I mean, where do we begin? Let's start with analyzing what we were told through the years before any of this happened. My point here is to demonstrate that none of this is random. All of this has been planned going way back, and
Yeah.
it's being orchestrated in a particular fashion. So you'll come across legislation being laid out step by step in America, which basically give the government all the power it needs, uh, so that when a pandemic is declared, they can basically come and declare martial law, force vaccines on people, and do all the other things that they've been planning right now. So the legislation has not just come up right now, it's being built on top of each other. And if you go and study the history of the legislation, you can see a very step by step pattern. Like, they were building the infrastructure that they need to basically put into place right now all through the decades. Okay.
Mm.
And there's this document that comes up starting in 2010 by one of these cult connected operations, the satanic cult that
Mm.
I'm talking about, called the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefellers are big time up in the pyramid in
Yeah.
terms of being one of the families that are actually behind this whole plot. And they
Yeah.
put together a document called Lockstep, where they were talking back then about a scenario where there would be a deadly disease pandemic, and they even
Yeah.
described exactly the way things played out right now. They described it like 10 years ago. Talk about being
Yeah.
prophetic. Okay, so they described basically
Mhm.
that it would China would be the first one to basically like
Really?
yeah, they this is there, you can look this up, it's called Lockstep. So
I just yeah, I'm researching as I go, so I'm typing these things down for
yeah,
myself.
that's okay. So
For everyone like just watching, I'm gonna speak to Johan, like reference a lot of links and videos and probably books and stuff they could read and refer to. So we'll share all of that.
yeah, so this Lockstep document basically lays out, like I said, what's going on right now. They talk about how China would be the first one to implement authoritarian controls,
Mm.
and the West would initially be hesitant to do that. But once China would
Mm.
do it, and once China would implement a total lockdown, it would give the precedent for the entire world to go and follow the same. Because as we
Mm.
saw, the example had been said that, okay, China got this bad disease, it was being covered
Yeah.
up, government implemented a lockdown, and as soon as they, you know, ended the lockdown, all the disease rates vanished. It's like zero. Okay,
You
so
create a
they,
problem, you show a solution, and then everyone replicates it.
yeah, exactly. So they manufacture the perfect example of what needs to be done to the T. It's
Yeah.
like, if you do this, you'll get this result. And then the world basically sort of picked that up and
See, this is
followed
a
it.
good guy. This is a bad guy.
Yeah,
He lived. He died. Which one do you want to be?
yeah, exactly. And this was described 10 years ago by a
Okay.
foundation which
That's a little unbelievable. Yeah.
by a foundation and a family which, if you investigate, you'll come across a lot of different aspects that they've been involved in manipulating this agenda. So they will be involved behind the scenes in orchestrating a lot of the response to this as well right now. And it basically, in the document, they are talking about fake news as well, like the infodemic and the amount of misinformation that would be there, and the governments would have to get more authoritarian. There would be a pushback from the people's side. Like, literally everything we're seeing right now was laid out 10 years ago in the document. So I would highly suggest people to go and read the document. There are other things, like I'll just tell you things that basically predicted what's happening right now back then. There's a simulation, obviously, that people are familiar about, called Event 201, which,
People are not familiar, bro. I have no idea.
okay, no, this is the John Hopkins simulation that David Icke was talking about, that we referred to.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is the simulation that was done in a hotel in New York in
Mm.
2019 in September, I think, by the John Hopkins University, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and
Yeah.
another operation, the World Economic Forum. Yes. And what they did is basically they simulated.
WHO, you mean, not World
Sorry,
Economic Forum. World Health Organization, you mean.
World Economic Forum.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so these three were involved in the simulation, and this is an exact replica of the Lockstart document, but they got even more specific. Okay, so listen to this. This is like literally 6 weeks before this thing kicked off in China. Okay, and
Yeah.
they are sitting in this hotel in New York with all these major corporations and the infectious disease organizations like the CDC and the WHO. They basically had like mock actors over there. Okay, they weren't actually like heads of CDC sitting over there, but they had the simulation where they had all these different organizations and government people that would be involved in responding to a pandemic, and they put actors over there. They literally simulated news broadcasts where they were like reporting on the pandemic that they were simulating in that exercise. So all of these videos are on the internet. You can go watch it. They're still up there on Event 201's YouTube page. And
I'll check this out.
what they said is basically, think of this. Okay, they basically said
Mm.
a new novel coronavirus outbreak. Okay, broke out in an animal farm. Okay,
Have
this
you
is
seen that thing, the Korean show on Netflix?
I have. This is the
I
thing I'm
didn't look
telling
my
you.
head.
Okay, this it goes way back. This is not something that just come up and happened by accident. Like these events are planned
Symptoms.
way long back, and this is no surprise to me. Like people like me who've spent
Yeah.
hours, like hours and like thousands of hours of research investigating things like 9/11 on other people, because it actually shows
Yeah.
you how such a broadly distributed and coordinated thing can be controlled, and all these people
Yeah.
can be pulled in, and like this whole the response to these events can be controlled,
Yeah.
which is it becomes a no-brainer once you understand the structure through which these people operate. But since people don't,
Yeah.
it feels like, oh, how could so many people be collaborating and being part of a conspiracy? How does
Yeah,
all
but
people
there's still
like
a small amount of people that run a lot of these
it's a
organizations.
pyramid, man. Like you have to understand, it's a pyramid where as you come down the levels of the pyramid, less and less people know less and less about what the
It's
people
like,
above them know.
so I'm
So
big on personal development, and like one of my philosophies used to be like, yeah, I used to discuss this with my friend a lot. They were like, we want to give to the masses, of course, right? But then he's like, that's why I don't want to like increase my price so much and make it so costly like my program that I can't give to the masses. So then I explain him like this example of this other company which sell the premium product, right, to the 20% of the world, and those 20% of the world are actually the leaders that will again influence the other people to be able to adapt this kind of knowledge. So, for example, if I'm helping someone get more mindful, I would rather help the leaders of all the organizations get mindful so that they can, like, again, like that pyramid scheme. So, I think what we're talking about is the same thing over here. It's just more effective to do this with a small sum of people who own a large sum of the world's assets to be able to influence.
yeah, it's very similar, and it's that's a great example because it's like you have you have these people who really it's like a tiny number of people who really in full knowledge know the full agenda behind all this and why they're really doing it, and they
Mm.
recruit people under them who are basically sold a certain version of the story. They're basically told that okay, like we're doing this, but it's they're given a good reason for it, like oh it's world government is
Morally believable
it's like the
reason.
evolution of the planet is needed in order to solve our problem. So it's like they'll be given a certain spin of why they're doing it, and they'll be
Yeah.
given like
Chinese whisper it all the way down.
official reasons for believing why what they're doing is good, but they don't know the
Yeah.
real agenda behind it. So you have at different levels you have different people who know different levels of knowledge, but that's how this whole system like basically works. Everyone works on a need to know basis. Okay, people
Yeah.
in these organizations, they only know what they need to know in order to make their contribution. They don't know what
Yeah.
the person above them knows, or they don't know what the person sort of working in another department working towards the same goal knows. They don't see how all of this interconnects, basically, which
Yeah.
is something that can be discovered if you're sitting on the top, or unless you slog your ass off and basically like spend years of your life researching and uncovering this whole map out as to how this thing really works. So
Yeah.
coming back to the simulation, 6 weeks before, they said a new novel coronavirus outbreak broke out in an animal farm, and it would basically lead to millions of people dying all over the world. They spoke about the infodemic, what they're calling right now fake news, like all this stuff like pandemic stuff that they're trying to
mm,
censor. Uh, they basically like they're talking about it in the simulation that there would be people who would question this, and they would be spreading conspiracy theories about it. So there would be a need for our friends at Facebook and Google and all to crack down on them, and the mainstream media to set
mm,
the tone on what is really going on. They were talking about this in the
mm,
simulation, and they were talking about the response, like what would need to be done. They would need to have certain responses like surveillance measures. Governments would have to do
mm,
contact tracing. Like contact tracing is just a
mm.
fancy word for Big Brother surveillance. It's just what
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So like extremely prophetic simulation happened with notorious
Mm,
characters like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Economic
mm,
Forum. These are absolutely John Hopkins as well. Like these are notorious bodies if you actually go and research their background and see the kind of stuff they've been involved with. Especially Bill Gates
mm,
has become very prominent right now because people are starting to realize his tentacles that have basically hijacked the global health system in all different areas, whether it comes to owning the World Health Organization, owning the
mm,
media where he controls the reporting on his
mm,
activities and what's being done, the amount of scientific research and bodies he controls through his medical grants and things like that. Like his tentacles are literally all over the place.
mm.
So this was another prophetic sort of event that told us something that was coming. And you have many other things like this, which I can sort of put an article in the show notes to show you how many things like this
Yeah.
happened before this thing really kicked off. I'm just connecting the dots here and showing you that this is not an accident. This thing was known and it was planned much before. It's not something that China
Mm,
unleashed on the world. Once you understand how the structure operates, they have,
mm,
like I said, they have this tiny spider at the center of at the top of the pyramid, basically, which is these tiny
mm,
number of bloodline families, which
mm,
at their core will know the real agenda. And they have their offshoots in different countries all over the world. They have
mm,
interconnected families which basically work in other countries in order to implement the agenda. We will have these in India as well. We have these secret society networks set up in different countries all over the world, which basically represent the interest of this satanic cult all over the world. And this is how the response can be coordinated by different so-called countries, which act as opposing sides. I mean, they are opposing sides on a political level, if you see the political banter and the rhetoric.
mm,
But there are levels above them where they interconnect into the same organizations, where they are working
yeah.
towards the same goal of taking over the planet. But lower down the levels, people really think there's a divide, which is what helps to create crisis as well. Because it's only when you can create wars and manipulate different nations into basic conquest, can you create
Yeah.
a more centralized world after these events have taken place. Like see World War I and World War II, for example. It's
Mm,
after those wars happened that they were able to centralize power even quicker. They were able to create the UN, the World Health
true.
Organization,
Yeah.
international
Yeah.
bodies that are literally dictating what's going on around the world right now. Okay,
Interesting.
so and you can see this in many other
My
movies.
question
There
is,
are movies like Contagion. I think you brought up the TV series that you brought up as well. You can see many themes of this. There's
yeah,
a novel that was written in 1981 that basically spoke about a coronavirus breaking out from a lab in Wuhan. So
which one?
this is
Which
like
book?
really. I'll send you all of the stuff. Will be in the
Yeah,
show notes, so
I'll add
people
it in
can
the
go and
description.
check it out.
So my last like two, three questions before we shut down is
Yeah,
first of all, like the why, according to you, is it
yeah.
greed? Is it fear? Is it
That's what I was going to
um,
get to.
and like the second, how is this information legitimized for people that share it today? Like um, and then we'll talk about like information a little bit more before closing. Like how do we validate this stuff?
The why is the most important thing in all this, which is what I was going to come to anyway. Because what did
Mm.
I tell you earlier before this conversation started? Okay, the cult basically wants to take over the world and basically create world government and a centralized authoritarian control structure on the planet. They use events, false flags, like we spoke about, in order to go
No,
closer to
that's
the
my why.
agenda.
Like why is
Yeah,
that? Is it like why do they want to do that? Like I understand the
I,
justification. So now
I'll touch on that. What
yeah,
I'm trying to
yeah,
lay out here
okay.
is the reason what they use,
The context of it.
how they're using COVID to get to that. Okay, so look at the
Yeah.
world before COVID and look at the level of surveillance and look at the control system that we had before it. And look at now what they're talking. Once COVID has happened, they're talking about something called the new normal, where
Mm.
society will have to totally change in a certain way, and our freedoms will have to be drastically reduced, like in the way they're suggesting right now. So let me talk of some of the implications that they want to play out as a result of COVID. Firstly, there will be drastic restrictions on free speech. Okay, since they want to control the narrative and they want to make sure that the people are only getting the information they want us to get, there's going to be rampant levels of censorship. I mean, this has already gone on in the mainstream media. We've barely ever been told anything from the mainstream media that resembles the truth. And the few journalists that come out and speak, like
Are
people
shut
at
down.
CNN, and like Amber Lyon, and there are a couple of others who've sort of come out from mainstream journalist organizations and
Mm.
spoken out, they lose their jobs very quickly, because these media outlets are controlled by the same cult that controls the other institutions. So,
Mm.
there's going to be rampant censorship of information. We're seeing this already with Facebook as well. This is why people like Ike and YouTube is now censoring all information that goes contrary to the World Health Organization's narrative.
So this
Videos are being
would be
taken
probably
down.
banned.
Sorry.
Our video should probably be banned then. Maybe I don't have a big
Probably
enough.
if we probably title it the right way, it won't be. Don't worry about that. And we are small channels, so they don't bother much about
Yeah,
us. They basically like
yeah,
bother about the big channels who have a large following, because that's where the real impact is.
yeah.
So number one, that's going to be censored. Number two is something which I've been talking about. They want to roll out a social credit system. Okay, the surveillance state that I'm talking about that they want to create. They basically want to create a world where people only get food and they only get money if your views are in alignment with what authority wants you to believe. Okay, this is
Mm.
a big reason why people should start taking this seriously. Because
Yeah.
if we continue down this road, okay, and if the reason they are implementing this lockdown right now is to devastate the economy, is to destroy our
Mm.
economic independence. Okay, if I can't run a business or work for myself and generate my own income, what do I become? I become dependent on the state to feed me.
Mm.
And if I'm a dissident, and if my views differ from what the state wants me to believe, they will just cut me off, and I'll basically starve to death, and I'll be like kicked off the system. This is the kind of real
Mm.
future we're staring into that's coming very, very soon if people don't lift their heads up from the sand and start taking a serious look at this. So this China had the social credit system wherein people are being affected in their real lives by their points being manipulated if they had the wrong political opinions, if they spoke to the
It's
wrong
like
people.
Facebook all over again.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like do
And
what works for you.
this is why the Silicon Valley tech giants are working so closely with China, because they want to implement the Chinese technocratic model all over the world. Okay, this is what we're seeing right now. So the social
Mm.
credit system, if you understand it in China, based on the points people have, it dictates whether people get a loan, whether they can travel. Okay, people have been stopped from
Yeah.
traveling in China because they had a bad credit score, because they weren't good citizens. Like, and the government decides if you're a good citizen or not. So
Freedom.
yeah, this is where it's going. Okay, so the credit score that we're going to get in Aadhaar for Indians, Aadhaar is going to be connected into this, and they have plans to mandatorily microchip us and connect us into this grid that I'm talking about, where your credit score, which is basically your opinions, what you do in life, and how the government sees you. If your credit score goes in the negative, okay, it will decide if you get food or not, literally. And the people who think they are wealthy right now, and the people who think they have money in the bank, and they have multiple houses spread in India, they have good cars, they have a 7-digit salary. Look,
Mm.
honestly, the way things are going right now, the agenda I've been describing for years. Okay, you can go and see my Facebook post for years. I've been saying they want to create a Hunger Games society where they want all of us at the bottom of the pyramid, all of us equally poor, and these tiny few people sit at the top and they basically run the world. So people who think they are in the middle class right now, okay, even I'm like well-to-do. I don't have much to worry about. If I wasn't concerned about this, I'll just be like, fuck it, man. I'll just live my life until this thing happens, and like, why should I bother? But they're coming for all of us. They're coming for the people who are even like upper middle class and people who consider themselves rich and run businesses. Okay, they want to destroy all of us. They want to take away all our independent economic freedom. They want to crash the banking system. So the banks take away all our money. They want to make things cashless. So we can't withdraw money from the banks. So we're basically enslaved to the banking system. And then the banks go bust because the people can't pay back their loans and the banks default. And they take our money directly from our bank accounts, which is totally legal right now. And then we all become broke. And once we become broke, we become dependent on the state. And then if we are dissidents, the state decides if we live or we die. Okay, this is not theory, man. Like this is something that we're looking into right now closely. And if people don't understand the severity of this, they're gonna regret it in the future. Trust me on that. That
So, but what does one do? How does one choose a lifestyle? How does one live
there's
according to
no
you?
other. I mean, I'm not even done describing all the things they want to justify
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
of this. But like like I was saying, so they want to implement
Actually, I'm
drastic
scared. Like this is how
restrictions.
my body language is right now.
No, I'm being serious, man, because I've studied this thing for years, and this is what I've been warning people for. It's coming. Like if you think you can go on living your life without having to challenge this stuff, they're gonna come for you at some point, and they're gonna take away everything from you that you love, and they're gonna destroy your life. They literally want to. This is about the end of humanity, dude. If people don't understand, this is if people still don't think they need to look into this, I mean, like, I don't know what to say. But honestly, the future we're looking at, which is going to be justified as the result of COVID right now, is going to be one of no freedoms. Government can just come and pick you up from your house, separate your family members if they think that someone is ill in your
Are you
family, and
normalizing
basically,
that
like,
to a
yeah,
pandemic environment?
yeah. I mean, children. I'm seeing fucking like really heartbreaking videos. I was like literally crying, sobbing yesterday, seeing this video of a child being separated from a mom because the mom was basically like going out and protesting against this thing. So like people have to really understand
What do
this.
you do is the question then. Like, how do you choose to fight it?
Look, the first
And
response to any the
what's the
first response to
guarantee
any
to
problem, the
yeah.
first response to any problem is to understand. Okay, if I'm not going to sit here and explain to you what's coming, it's okay. It's like strategy. It's like warfare planning, man. If you don't understand who your enemy is and how they are going to come and like catch you by the balls, you're not going to have any way to respond to them. So people need to like really start in like looking into this stuff and at least understand the themes and the basics of what who are these people. Firstly, okay, understand the
Mhm.
coordinates. Who are these people? How do they manipulate society? Where do they want to take us? That's all people
Yeah.
need to understand. Okay, and once you understand where they want to take us, you can clearly see the tapestry and the ways in which they manipulate us to take us there. All the while, like it's like there's one version of reality which is the movie, which is what we call okay, contract tracing, flatten the curve,
Yeah.
okay, like stay home, save lives, this kind of crap. And then there's
Yeah.
another version of reality that's simultaneously running, which is actually the truth. So
Mhm.
people have to break out from this movie version of reality that we're being sold, because if people continue believing in that, garbage in, garbage out, people will think that what the
With
government,
retaliation, I really like
yeah,
stopping
there will be no
people.
pushback. So like I'm saying, look, the only solution is to this: become aware of the problem, help educate others, and we need to organize and grow the resistance. And it doesn't
But
need
see, like, if you think about it, I'm
it
just
doesn't
like
need
I'm
violent
simulating this.
yeah, it doesn't need violent revolt or something. It just
And
needs,
now let's just simulate this.
yeah.
Sorry.
So
Let's say a person does choose to believe it, right? Now, in for him, there's like a balance of they need to find because, like, for example, you've been researching this for a couple of years. I maybe for a month or something have been looking into this and am at the path of it. But let's just take my example, right? I still believe in a system, and you don't want to lose that sense of security, right? And at the same time, be an outlier or be someone who's just like a rebel to society and just like be boycotted by the entire society because of what you believe in, and at the same time you do want to stand up for what you believe in because of this, you don't want to be caught in what we're talking about being the existential future, right? So how does one find that middle ground of retaliation, of sharing information, of like creating awareness, and like this is something to think about. I'm not asking for an answer, but like how do we find like a mid balance between this, where if someone, for example, any type of progress takes like step by step approaches, right? So if you try and take too big a leap, then you always end up falling, right? So like my whole thought process while taking in this information is that how do we create a system for something like this that allows a person to step by step take an approach towards like making sense of this for themselves, finding the right resources, having the right of free information, giving them a lens to look at things from, and sharing and like step by step including them to uh, like understanding this for themselves and proving it to themselves, because I feel like that is like sustainability in this solution is absolutely necessary because if there's so much manipulation going around, then you will never know what's true, what's not true. And if there's so much manipulation going around, the system might just be able to overcome everything that you're believing and like show you a completely different reality. And you might just be in this psychological dissonance where you're like, the fuck am I actually doing? Right? Are you getting my thought? Like how deep this goes? Like if the rabbit hole goes so deep, you need an approach towards getting a person to be able to retaliate, because it's going to be about that. It's going to be about the masses that you can get to fight this. Because if people refuse to get vaccines, people refuse to not like if they stand up for an open source government or something like that, only that's when these solutions are going to come in place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's you don't have so much control if you think about
Yeah. So touching on
it.
what you
What will
said,
I do? I'll go
basically,
live in the jungle, right? Like,
that's not a solution. Okay, firstly, I'll tell you that
yeah,
it might buy people some time going off grid and stuff, but
that's what I was thinking. Like,
yeah,
want to go in the
it'll
jungle.
buy it'll buy people some time. It'll take more time to come into the rural areas, but these people want to clear out all the forest areas and the areas other than the cities that they want people to live in, and basically like
Mm.
put military rule over there where no one's allowed to stay. Okay, this is
Mm.
something we like. I don't have the time to go into in detail right now, but okay,
Fair
look.
enough.
Firstly, touching on what you said, I'm not sitting here as some kind of authority or some kind of person
No, no.
telling people
Yeah,
like this is what you must believe. I'm
yeah.
like telling you like if you don't believe me, then you'll face this or that. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, look, I want people to start thinking for themselves. The reason we've gotten into this mess is because humanity as a collective has given its mind away. Okay, we've given our mind away to a system that basically wants to destroy us. And if we want to change the course of society, if we want to change where the world is heading, we have to take control of our perceptions back and you know actually realize like I want people to understand that there's nothing special about me or Ike or anyone else. Okay, we're just
Yeah.
people who basically chose to take control of our minds back and started investigating things for ourselves and realize
It
that
boils down to what you said about freedom, I believe.
yeah, everyone is a unique being with their own capabilities that has the potential to make up their mind on their own. Okay,
Yeah.
there are some things we outsource our opinions from, but you need to start thinking about where your perceptions are coming from, and if something you believe is not something you've thought of for yourself, but you've just believed it because some government official or some academic or some bloody media person came and told you, you need to
Yeah.
question that and actually figure out both sides of the issue. What are people like me saying? What is the material that's available which contradicts that saying, and then make up your mind instead of just believing one-sided information that the system is constantly bombarding at you. So that's all I
Yeah.
want people to do is
It's
at
like
least
create your own quote, listen
yeah
to both sides,
yeah
have a
open
jury.
like actually have an open mind and collect
Mm.
information from a vast body of sources. This is how the ancients actually educated people in the past with the ancient occult mystery schools, the light schools in the past who actually held occult knowledge. They basically had this
Mm.
method called the trivium, wherein it was the process was basically you collect a wide body of knowledge from a vast variety of sources which forms your base. It's the building blocks of your mind. You
Mm.
start investigating that, and then you like process that information, then you come to accurate conclusions about it, and then you form your behaviors based on it. But
Yeah.
your behavior at the top is based on the base at the bottom. If your base at the
Yeah.
bottom is going to be only what you're getting from the government and from all the systems
Mm.
bombarding you
If you
with
haven't heard both sides, then your
yeah
base is singular. Like it's
your outcome, your action is going to be totally
going to be defined from
what
that.
what they're programming you to believe in. If you
Yeah.
see that process is so clear, it's like if they want you to act in a certain way, they control the source of information, which is why it's
I
important for
always, whenever you see this, look at it from that micro macro way,
yeah
where in a micro level as a child and in a macro level as a society, you know, you're conditioned. So as a child, whatever your parents have said to you, as what society is made normal or normalized to an entire extent, and that's the cause of your behavior today. Whatever fears you have, whatever beliefs you have, patterns you have, are just rooted from that place. So if that root is just one side of an argument, right? You get to explore like the other side and define for yourself who you want to be instead of being defined by someone else.
exactly. And the other point that you mentioned is look, in order for people to do what they feel needs to be done, I would just ask people connect with your heart. Okay, firstly have a quest for truth. want to learn the truth about what's going on. Don't just believe what you're told. Okay, it's like question everything. If
Yeah.
anything I've told you today suggests is that there is high reason to believe that we've been misled in many areas, and you need to
Yeah.
at least investigate it and figure out for yourself if what I'm saying is
Yeah.
right or it's just a load of bollocks. And then
Yeah.
if you believe it's bullshit anyways, it's okay, man. What's the harm? Like the worst thing you did is spend some time investigating what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And you're more enlightened after that anyway. So
Yeah.
look,
And
there are only
more than
two.
just go
There
and
are
like
only
go
two
through your
consequences.
sources, don't
Yeah,
believe you, you know?
yeah, yeah. There are only two consequences to not doing anything right now. Okay, and
Mm.
we've had this choice for many years. The reason we've society has totally constantly progressed towards a point where we're getting less and less free and we're getting more and more enslaved. It's obvious to anyone
Mm.
with a fucking brain cell who just looks around what's going on in the world today that we're not free at all.
Mm.
We're totally enslaved, and we're getting to a point where it gets even worse. Is that humanity has not chosen to intervene in this agenda. We've let it go on because of a fear of consequences, because of the pushback we'll get from our friends, from our coworkers. We might lose our job, we might have these consequences thrown at us. All of these things have kept
Mm.
people from intervening. Now, what I'm telling you is look, we've come this far as a result of complying and not doing anything. If we continue with the same mindset and we go on into the future, what I'm telling you is going to happen. This is why we've been able to predict the future for so long, because we've been telling people this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, and no one's chosen. Very few people have chosen to do something about it. So if we continue down this road, you're going to face the consequences I'm telling you about. And you don't have to be some kind of dissident to be thrown out of the system I'm telling you about. You just need to understand the kind of system they're building is a prison system for literally everyone on the planet. Okay, they want all of
Yeah.
us living in slavery, and no one wants it. Trust me, if you understand what's coming, you don't want it, I don't want it, none of your viewers watching it would want it unless they're absolute psychopaths. So it's just a choice people have to make, man. What are the consequences of you stepping up now? Just understand the consequences of you stepping up now compared to what's coming down the road for you if you don't do anything, and make that choice.
It's like
Make that choice
both
for yourself.
sides have fear, right? If you leave society, there's a fear of being boycotted. If you don't do that, there's a fear of going in this very, very unfortunate future that you're describing, right?
And the first one is a little
The
inaccurate
difference
because
is
a lot of us are waking up, and waking up is a wonderful gift actually, because you start connecting with
100%.
people
No, no, no,
who
but
are on your
you
path,
still
and
have a fear.
yeah,
Before you wake up, you still
yeah,
have a
yeah,
fear, right?
yeah.
Before you meditate, फटती है सबकी meditate करने से, right? I've been there. So, but the difference over here that I see is that at one side, which is let's say the government and the system side, you don't have access to resources. You have to take their words. On the contrary, um, like we're going to be sharing links of like event 201, of like pandemic, like that chick actually coming out and taking names and sharing all of this stuff, lockstep being an actual document, and sharing all of this. WikiLeaks is like the biggest source of a lot of this information, rather, so I don't know if any of this is like on WikiLeaks or not, but I'm just saying like there's so much information out there, so people have that opportunity to go and read it on their own and make that opinion. So one of my question was to you, which was going to be to you, was like, how do people decide their mind and stuff? And you actually just answered that. So yeah, I guess people just have to go and
Just be honest with
like
yourself.
take that journey.
Just like people have to be honest with themselves and actually make their own choice. That's it. Everyone's a
I think
sovereign
people
being,
just
and
deserve the right to listening to all of these things and
yeah, that's why I'm
um,
doing everything that I'm doing. I want people to have access to it, so at least their choices are
yeah,
informed. Instead of making one-sided choices, at least they'll be making choices from an informed perspective, taking
yeah,
everything into account.
yeah, exactly. Like, where do you find a balance though, personally, in life?
For me,
I don't know if that makes sense to
the
say.
spiritual side of things is very important. So I mean, we didn't
Yeah.
get the time to go into this today, but the rabbit hole
We'll
goes
have to
very.
talk a lot more. I have a
Yeah,
feeling
yeah.
like it's a
No, I surely look forward to it, but I'm saying that the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper, and it goes beyond the people controlling this planet into the spiritual realms as well, where there's a very bigger aspect to understand when it comes to the spirit realms, and what's really going on with the nature of our reality and stuff. So I think that's my true balance in terms of like really
yeah,
getting a bigger perspective, because you know what is the conspiracy basically? It's keeping us in this perceptual bubble where we are like
Yeah.
literally our name, our race, our income bracket, our religion, and like, all these labels we give to ourselves. We're like these
Hmm.
biological robots who have this existence where whether people believe in God, or like they're constantly living in fear of life because if they do something that the book doesn't tell them, they'll go to hell. And if they believe in a hardcore like scientific materialism and atheism, they're basically thinking that they're constantly in fear of death, because if this life
Hmm.
ends, then they have nowhere to go and everything is just lights out. So these two
Hmm.
belief systems have done a lot to actually keep people suppressed and keep people in a really, really little me, powerless kind of
Yeah.
state. And it's breaking out from that bubble and actually expanding your sense of consciousness to identify with the spirit that you are. Like your body is just a biological computer for you to have your experience
Everything.
in this tiny frequency band called visible light
Yeah.
that we're experiencing. Okay,
Yeah.
it's not who you are. It's just a way for your spirit to
Yeah.
experience this sort of experience in this tiny range of frequency. So
You're one of the
that
few people that have said that, um, like the light bit, because
I
I
mean,
was
we're
reading
basically
autobiography
blind, man.
thing.
We're basically blind. If you see our
Yeah.
perceptual capabilities and how much we can see compared to how much there is to see, it's like we're basically like
You
the
should read
we
the
don't
book,
have
an
the equipment to we
autobiography.
don't have to
Yeah.
equipment to tap into other realms of existence that would. And this is what happens with psychics and people who can actually like have a broader, say
Perspective.
no, a broader range of communication with
Mm.
frequencies like
Yeah.
sort of beyond what we can tune in, so they
Yeah.
can access more than normal people can.
That's exactly what this book, Autobiography for Yogi, talks about. It has these two chapters that really stand out for me, which is the law of miracles, where it talks about how all these miracles and stuff actually take place, where people are teleporting or have telekinesis, or are able to communicate with each other, and like different of these psychic abilities where people are able to resurrect each other. And basically, what they explain is like all these yogis and mystics are are able to do that. Basically, what you're explaining, like able to have a broader range of frequencies and manipulate light, because everything that we're experiencing in this world is a manifestation of light itself. So there's one belief, like for me, that just keeps me in balance throughout life. Whenever anxiety hits me, is wherever I'm supposed to be in life right now, uh, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So everything that I'm experiencing, everything that I'm going through, everything talking is exactly meant for me to be able to move towards like spiritual growth. So that's just kind of like, is like, rest assured you're taken care of. If you're feeling bad, you're supposed to feel bad. If you're feeling good, you're supposed to feel good. If you're watching this video right now, you're exactly supposed to be watching this video right now. You're not supposed to be doing anything else. I'm having this conversation with you right now. That's exactly where I'm supposed to be. So that just gives me this sense of like contentment, like you said, like spirituality in itself. It's like the core of my base in life, for
Exactly,
sure.
like none of the stuff is actually paranormal once you understand the nature of reality and how this matrix that we live in really operates. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of like getting the principles right. And like once you have an understanding of that, all these things that the so-called science can't explain today, like psychic phenomena and teleportation and like different things like that, are totally explainable. Like there are people in the cutting edge of science today where there's a ton of research being done on remote viewing and like all these sort of frontier science areas that most so-called self-professed skeptics scoff at. But there's a lot of truth to it
Like,
if people investigate it with an open mind. And I would just say this for the things you said. I mean, look, I agree with a lot of it. I would just say this, that most people tend to get into the new age view of things and the kind of mystical, spiritual conventional understanding of the spirit world and how everything
mm,
works, and understanding of karma, and
mm,
some conventional concepts that are spread in common spiritual material, and they tend to take
mm,
it as an end all be all and they stop there. My point is, I started there, and there is a lot more to go into if you continue down that road towards which will make you, I wouldn't say prove what you're saying wrong, but I would say put a lot more context and perspective on what
mm.
you're saying being part of something much bigger. So I would like encourage you highly, like keep going with your research into the spirit world. Don't stop there and basically like set your shop over there.
No, no, it's just a journey. It's a way of living, I believe. Like
Yeah,
to be able to just like live this path. And I don't think like a lifetime would be good enough for a person to be able to, like resolve on their karma or just understand the whole truth. But the journey is in and of itself like such a peaceful and a mindful journey that it's worth it. Like, like just like I remember going for Vipassana like twice I've been, and it's just like those are the times that I'm like I don't mind leaving the rest of the world and just staying here. And then my mom comes in my head and she's like, "Yaar, I asked her, I'm like, Mom, do you mind if I become a sadhu one day? She's like, "तुझे बच्चे नहीं करने, बीवी नहीं करने." I'm like chill, man. Like, there's like this urge for going and like just meditating and like being with nature and trying to understand the laws of the universe, but not understand them through reading, but understand them through experiencing. And I think like meditation and constant like observation is what will get you there. So on that note, I think it's like just a lens. Like for example, when you explore, let's say the laws of the universe, like the law of what they say manifestation and stuff, and then you realize like, oh, this happens like this, and people ask you, oh, I thought of this and this came in my life. Once you have the lens of observation, you're able to see it more clearly. So once you have the lens of observation for, let's say, what we discussed today, a person hopefully might be able to see these things because now they have some context to it. So getting full circle to it, like the objective of this whole conversation was to create not only a lens for myself, but in that journey actually be able to share this with many more people, and you just give them a lens to think from. If they see things from that lens, then like keep feeding that, till it doesn't make sense or it does make sense, and like decide for yourself. But it always, like every person that's discovered this hopes that it's not the truth. Every conspiracy theorist would want. That's what I believe. Like, would want none of this shit to be true.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm doing this. Like, that's the reason people like us are doing it, so that we stop it and like we basically have a world
Yeah,
where none of our predictions have to be true. I want freedom, and I don't want
yeah,
to be sitting in.
yeah.
If I didn't have to do this, I'd probably like have a career in music, like I did before this. I have to leave
Oh,
the,
dude,
I have to leave that to actually like focus on this full time and do my work here.
this
So,
is
I
like
mean,
where you felt most responsible, I guess.
yeah, exactly like that. There's a point where I had to give all my time to this because I recognized the urgency of what was coming 4 years ago. So I made that choice, and I'm glad
Mhm.
I did actually.
Yeah, man. And you'll never regret it. As long as you enjoy every day of it, you feel fulfilled, you feel purposeful towards doing it, you're helping people. That is so fulfilling. And that's like what we call is like, when we say ki violence nahi karna, or like what's wrong or what's right, that will always be standardized right. So you'll never regret it.
All right, I think that's a good note to end this conversation on. It was a pleasure speaking to
Yeah,
you,
man.
Parth, and I hope we do
Me
more
too,
again.
man.
And like I hope your audience finds value in what I said as well. People wanting to really take a deeper look into this, I'd recommend you can go to my website
Yeah.
anarchyforfreedom.in, and I have a start here section where anyone looking to get an introduction into the ideas I'm presenting and the problem and the solution, basically just like compartmentalized in one page with an in-depth article, that's the place to start. And my YouTube channel has a lot of complementary material where I continue to expand on the ideas and the wide range of subjects that I continue to investigate and present my research on. So yeah, that's
We'll
where you
link
can
all of
find
this
me.
in the
Yep,
description, and even like the things that we spoke about, we'll just discuss it over chat once. We'll
sure.
share with them like Event 201, Lockstep document, and all the other things that you think that they could go through for themselves. It would be great material. Anyway,
Right,
man,
man.
absolute pleasure, and hopefully we'll do
Likewise,
this again.
likewise.
And
Yeah,
I'm
thank you
glad
so much
like
for
we had our
having me.
first conversation with you. Peace, man. Take care.
Thanks, Parth. Bye. See you.
Bye.